When it comes to the found footage genre of films, it can often be easy to fall down a rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, did this actually happen? How about we kick off today with a flick that technically already has a couple of bands on its record, the Poughkeepsie tapes. For about a decade, this movie was the stuff of legend, the type of thing that's only found in a creepypasta. If you believe the rumors, this documentary about a serial killer terrorizing Poughkeepsie, New York, used real footage of that man attacking, harming, and killing his victims. Obviously that isn't the case since it's a completely fictional film about a made-up serial killer and not a snuff flick, but that hasn't kept the film from holding on to its true story legacy. So the movie opens with the discovery of the tapes themselves. After uncovering 10 bodies in a residential backyard, the police unearthed something far more menacing: over 800 tapes from a killer, each detailing his heinous exploits. So composed of this found footage, combined with interviews with experts and one victim's testimony, the movie pieces together the story of the Water Street Butcher. Now this flick is difficult to stomach and is best accompanied by a lot of trigger warnings. The film's eerie mimicry of early 2000s true crime shows like Forensic Files and Unsolved Mysteries is quite convincing, making it difficult not to get sucked into the reality of it all. Even today, people are tricked into believing that the footage from the tapes is, well, real, despite the red flags pointing to the contrary. This claim to reality is a constant source of controversy for the film, as is its deeply upsetting content. But the thing that stands out most in complaints is that it wasn't the movie people preemptively decided it should be. So back in the day, it premiered at the 2007 Tribeca Film Festival, where it was quickly snatched up by MGM for distribution. Now they marketed the movie heavily, but it would all prove a huge waste of money when the film mysteriously vanished from the studio's 2008 release schedule. Though the movie could be found through less than legal means, it didn't get a wide release until it hit video on demand in 2014. But then MGM was like, we want to make more money. So then they pulled it again for a never-to-be-seen theatrical release. Finally, in 2017, Shout Factory released the movie on DVD and Blu-ray, which is more proof of the value of physical media. So for many of those early viewers, the fun of the mystery was, well, is the footage real? Why did MGM pull it? Was it banned for being too extreme? This and a plethora of other questions swirled around online forums in the time from those early trailers to the movie's eventual home release. What can I say? The killer's tapes are graphic, just not in the way that you would expect. Most of the violence is off-screen, implied, or described but not shown outright, forcing the audience to imagine the most disturbing moments. Spoiler alert, in what's been called the scariest scene in the movie, the killer, posing as a police officer, picks up a hitchhiking woman looking for a ride to the nearest gas station. And when he drives past the station, the woman's face falls into an expression of absolute dread as she realizes this isn't a police officer. And over the next 6 minutes, the audience is forced to watch as she hopelessly pleads for her life. If that doesn't terrify you, damn. I wish. Next up, we've got Capture, Kill, Release. Honestly, the title reminds me of playing Love, Marry, Kill when I was younger, but this isn't as silly. So Jen and Farhang are a seemingly happy married couple living in a suburban area in a nice-sized home. They appear to love each other, they love their lives together, but then Jen begins to talk about their plan to off somebody. They've already decided to do it, and they're gonna film the whole thing. So in this movie, we watch them meticulously decide what weapons we're gonna use. How are we gonna resize our bathroom for a dead body? Home Rentals 101, everybody. And also they gotta pick their victim. So barring films like August Underground, apparently this is as close to a snuff film as you can get without watching the real thing. So, cross that off the bucket list, I guess. The camera zooms in on saws hacking through arms, guts piling up in the tub, and it's an unflinching portrayal of the violence from the perspective of the killers. The viewer is placed in the subject position of both characters, seeing through their eyes and therefore implicating the viewer in the atrocities, which makes the viewing experience that much more uncomfortable on top of seeing red fluids drain out of the tub. Unsettling and uncomfortable, this movie is worth sitting through for the performances alone. Oh, and by the way, we enter this film after the duo have already made and committed to their plan. But as they film each other, the dynamic becomes clear. This isn't just a single psychopath filming his exploits. These are two people with complicated feelings trying to navigate love in the face of the unimaginable. These guys aren't just married, they depend on each other. They are each other's anchors to the point of codependency. The first-person perspective allows us to better understand their minds as they become more and more embroiled in the plan. This shocking found footage film isn't just about that shock factor though, it's about the love and how we come to depend on somebody in a relationship. Sure, in reality, if your partner asked you to kill somebody, you'd be like, alright, I'm out. But this, entertains the idea that maybe you'd want to stay, maybe you'd help. After all, love makes us do crazy things, and because of that mindset alone, that's why I'd consider this a dangerous movie. Here's a movie that's less about jump scare effect, more of a lingering sadness situation. More simply put, Lake Mungo is a movie about dread. This 2008 Australian horror film is pegged to the overall concept of dread, that lingering sense of inevitable but unknowable doom that hangs over our heads. To quote journalist Vinnie Mancuso, the experience isn't exactly pleasant, but it is essential to have your rear end absolutely handed to you by a horror movie from time to time. This is the only feature filmmaking effort to date by writer and director Joel Anderson, and this is a ghost story. It's built from grief, one that's immediately recognizable to anybody who's ever lost somebody or briefly lost themselves. It's devastating, it's terrifying, and I think every single person who loves horror with a pulse should watch it at least once, and then immediately call their loved ones. So the first stories you hear in the movie are Alice is Missing, which is both the literal driving force of the story and a heart-wrenching hint at its underlying themes. Told in a faux documentary format, the film tells the story of Alice Palmer, a girl of legal driving age who drowned at a dam in a small town in Australia. So in the aftermath, strange occurrences have the rest of the Palmer family believing in ghosts, the supernatural, yeah, kind of the supernatural ones, but also the lingering regrets of a life cut short. The Palmers admit that they never really knew their daughter, so Mother June admits she always struggled to connect with Alice, and there's some secrets are revealed to the point that the girl struggled to feel alive, even before her death. The Palmer's search for closure leads them to the actual Lake Mungo, to a cell phone buried by Alice on a school trip, and the footage she took weeks before her death. The footage has all the washed out graininess of a 2008 flip phone, but that's not quite what makes it feel otherworldly. So as Alice stumbles through the dark, the camera freewheels wildly. You feel untethered from time or location until you finally focus on something approaching from the darkness. Slowly, very slowly. And it's not until it's inches from the frame does the film freeze and tell you what you're seeing. Alice's own bloated, decomposing corpse somehow stumbling out of her future. So there's a couple of reasons why this moment is so effective, and the first being that it's so goddamn scary. Just masterful service level execution of gluing the audience in place, focusing on a single point, and then just walloping you over the head with an unexplainable image. But the ending of Lake Mungo is also devastating because of what it means. Or more accurately, because it lacks any concrete explanation for those of us left alive. Throughout the many twists and turns, the Palmer family is just searching for answers, because that's what you do when somebody dies. Hey, if you've ever suffered from anxiety or depression, you know what it's like to feel outside your body. To find you're drifting through life like a phantom. Alright folks, next up we have a movie that's so heinous, I'm not even supposed to be talking about it. I can't even say its title, but let's just call it the people-eating mass extinction event of the 1930s and 40s. This flick from director Ruggero Deodato wasn't his first movie about people eating, but definitely the one that got the most flack from the media. So this director's been making films since the 1960s, and he's always had a trademark style. Flashy, grimy pictures with a hardened edge and plenty of schmeksh and violence. He was one of the many Italian directors who facilitated the people-eating boom of the late 70s and had already made one such film, The Last C-Word World, before he got around to this one. So despite his sensationalist style, he had already proven himself not only a very competent director, but one with depth and ideas worthy of cinematic examination. So this is the story of a professor journeying to the Amazon to discover what happened to a film crew, since they're all kind of missing. Lots of brave young Americans, and you realize that this characterization couldn't have been further from the truth. From the offset, the movie looks at how the mass media portrays its fellow Americans, the marginalization of those outside the land of the free, and what it means to be civilized. So the young filmmakers are immediately positioned by the media as victims of local savagery, and when anthropologist Dr. Monroe is sent to find them, it's only through his embracing of the local people that he comes across the lost film reels that will piece the puzzle together. Broadcasting executives back in New York are foaming at the mouth at the prospect of a new documentary, even more sensational than what had been promised to them. And they're so focused on that sensation and the viewing figures that the sizzle reel they show includes such antics as the gang forcibly amputating the leg of their guide, literal seconds after he suffers a snake bite. And there's not a lot more I can talk about when it comes to the plot of this one. So as is the case with many old school exploitation flicks, the reels were seized on the grounds of obscenity. But then something crazy happened. Those same reels became evidence in criminal proceedings. And this wasn't just a plain old, too devious for public consumption theatrical release. Folks thought this was a snuff film, and the weirdos who made it were apparently so brazen in their criminality as to throw an official premiere for it. So the director was brought up on killing charges, and was forced to bring his actors in for interviews to prove that they were still alive. He then demonstrated how they performed some of the special effects in the film. Eventually those charges were dismissed, and also, perhaps slightly more in keeping with Italy's progressive artistic reputation, the courts eventually overturned the movie's ban several years later. But by this point, the director and several of his associates had suffered considerable legal troubles, and countries around the world were banning this flick, or at the very least censoring it heavily. Also, before I move on, this film isn't entirely innocent. Although 6 animal deaths appear on screen, several animals were killed for the production, as a scene depicting the monkey's death was done twice, resulting in the death of 2 monkeys. So this film should be still banned for that reason alone. in my opinion. Alrighty everybody, we're gonna end today with a short but unsweet entry, The Taking of Deborah Logan. Mia Hu records the daily lives of Deborah Logan, a woman with Alzheimer's, as a part of her thesis. And as Deborah's behavior becomes increasingly bizarre and violent, it becomes apparent that there's more at work than the ravages of an incurable disease. Chock full of horrific imagery and effective scares, this film was a quietly shelved one that saw a second life on Netflix where it became a cult favorite. Gotta love movies that have already been knocked down for being shown a couple of times.
We begin with the Blair Witch Project.
We're doing a documentary about the Blair Witch. Oh, have you heard of the Blair Witch?
Oh yeah, that's an old story.
We can't kick off a found footage horror movie without including the one that started it all. Released in 1999, the Blair Witch Project utilized found footage so effectively that people truly believed what they were seeing was really documentary footage. The movie follows three students, Heather, Michael, and Joshua, who hike into a Maryland forest in 1994 to film a documentary about the Blair Witch, a myth that has supposedly terrified locals for years. However, over the course of the 81-minute Fright Fest, strange things begin to happen, whether it be finding stick figures outside their tents or their belongings rifled through, or even one of them missing in the dead of night. The friends film their relentless ordeals in the woods, and we experience anguish alongside them as their one source of safety is removed from them, their map. They are well and truly lost, and Joshua is missing, somewhere in the woods. Is it the Blair Witch, or something even darker and more sinister? I have to say, the first time I watched the Blair Witch Project, I was paralyzed in fear at the final frame of the movie. For a movie with such a small budget and only 3 characters for the majority of the film, it is so effective at delivering horrors and making you feel just as trapped as the 3 students. For any horror movie lover, this should always be a first on your list, and if you haven't seen it yet, I am very disappointed. Before we continue, let me know below what your favorite found footage horror movie is, and maybe give this video a like once you're down there. Next up, we have The Visit. Here I come. While most are 50-50 about M. Night Shyamalan and his delivery of effective twists and turns, this man does have my heart, and I will argue that The Visit is one of the most horrifying movies to date. This 2015 horror movie follows siblings Becca and Tyler, who are visiting their grandparents on their farm for the first time. Like all horrors, things begin normal at first but soon descend into madness and chaos as the grandparents start acting very, very strangely. Determined to figure out what is going on, Becca and Tyler try to unravel the mystery by recording the strange events, some of which include the grandmother projectile vomiting, screaming into the camera, and chasing the siblings under the foundation of the house in one of the most chilling and heart-racing scenes in the entire movie. The Visit feels like there is reality behind it. How many of us haven't met our relatives? And if you did, you would trust them, right? They're family after all. The Visit feels a little too real with how it documents these kids meeting their grandparents for the first time, and the sinking feeling they feel when things begin to grow increasingly more sinister while being trapped on a farm with essentially strangers. Can you trust them? As M. Night Shyamalan loves to do, there are of course countless twists and turns to float your boat, and this movie doesn't neglect that, with it having perhaps one of my favorite twists in a found footage horror movie. The Visit successfully reinvents a saturated subgenre so effectively it feels like it was being done for the very first time. If you haven't yet watched it, you absolutely should, and if you didn't like it, you're wrong. Moving on, we have As Above, So Below.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
In my opinion, this is the most underrated movie on our entire list. When I discuss my love for this movie, I'm either met with disgust or people being confused about what the hell I'm talking about. This managed to fly under the radar, but for those who haven't seen it, it's a love or hate kind of movie. Released in 2014, this found footage horror gem takes place in the Paris catacombs, which is utterly terrifying. It follows a documentary crew as they explore the catacombs in hopes of finding the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance discovered by Nicholas Flamel, which is said to grant immortality and turn metals into gold. Not bad. This all may sound familiar to you if you have seen the first Harry Potter movie, but trust me when I say this movie is wildly different. The movie in essence is based on the 9 circles of hell from the poem Divine Comedy. The film primarily focused on Scarlet Marlowe, a sort of knockoff Lara Croft, but in a good way, follows her deceased father's clues as she delves deeper into the catacombs, following unmarked routes and facing challenges and terrifying occurrences. The remains of the lost aren't the only thing feeling haunting the team, but also their own personal demons that they must conquer in order to escape. The real horrors of this movie lies in reality as we witness the characters work their way through their own inner demons and become absolved, and in some cases found guilty of their sins. As Above, So Below is a mind-bending horror because you're never quite sure what you're witnessing is real or fake. Did a man just get sucked into a burning car in the depths of the catacombs? And are people in fact performing a satanic ritual? Or is this all in the minds of the characters who are slowly losing their way? It is a movie that's so incredibly smart and often flies right over people's heads. It explores themes of greed and obsession as well as touching on spiritual motifs. Sometimes you have to wonder if chasing something forbidden is worth the cost, because the cost just might be your life in As Above, So Below. Up next we have VHS.
Which one is it?
I don't know, man. Let's just
Look at these, okay?
The VHS series as a whole is excellent, particularly 1 and 2, but in this instance I'm going to strictly be discussing the first movie in the series. Released in 2012, VHS is an anthology found footage horror and is compiled of a series of interconnected shorts written by various horror directors including Adam Wingard, Ty West and David Bruckner. The connecting story follows a group of criminals hired to break into a home. However, inside they discover a collection of VHS tapes, all containing something terrifying and disturbing. From a group of friends on a paranormal investigation encountering a demon to a man with a camera recording a supernatural force, the contents of these tapes are truly horrifying. However, the standout story in the movie has to be Amateur Night, directed by David Bruckner. The segment follows 3 friends who rent out a motel room and intend on bringing a woman back to record their exploits. However, things don't turn out the way they intend for the best, as the woman they select might not be human at all. Without spoiling too much, the climax of this short is truly terrifying, also unbelievably rewarding for those who weren't rooting for the 3 friends, aka me. Combining found footage with anthology is a big feat, and VHS does it incredibly well. Finally, we have Wreck. This is not only one of my favorite found footage horror movies, but one of my favorite horror movies, period. Now, this movie should not be confused with its American counterpart, Quarantine. I understand wanting to bring this movie to a broader audience, but I will always push for people to watch the original Spanish version, as it is far superior and terrifying, in my opinion anyway. Released in 2007, this Spanish found footage horror Wreck, short for record, tells the story of a reporter and her cameraman, who are documenting and following firefighters. While things begin as normal, the firefighters soon get a call to an apartment building where a woman is trapped in her apartment. However, something sinister is happening inside. The woman displays aggression and begins to attack the firefighters, unbeknownst to them, spreading a terrifying infection that sweeps its way throughout the building, and no one is safe. Thankfully, we have the cameraman recording everything for our entertainment. The building is ultimately placed in a lockdown with no one coming in or out, with the reporter trapped inside documenting the entire thing. However, the infection isn't the only thing being housed inside the building. Something is inside the penthouse suite, and whether she wants to or not, our reporter is about to uncover the truth in the dark confines of the apartment. The final few moments of this movie are some of the most unsettling and chilling moments in any horror movie. The visual effects are unbelievably impressive for the budget, and the acting is truly superior. Will the reporter be able to uncover the truth of what is going on, and more importantly, will she escape the infection zone? What makes this movie feel so real and authentic is that it follows everyday life and forces you to doubt whether you are safe inside of your apartment building. Do you know your neighbor? Maybe you haven't seen them in a while. Maybe you've heard screaming down the hall. Wreck makes you believe anything is possible inside the confines of this apartment building, and the lockdown protocol is so believable it might just make you want to live in a house. You should absolutely give this movie a watch and let us know your thoughts below, because this one is a personal favorite of mine and I will not stop talking about it.
Number 5, The House That Jack Built. Director Lars von Trier has become known for his hard-to-sit-through movies throughout his career, so it makes sense that The House That Jack Built would be a movie made for only those with very strong constitutions. I am not one of those. The movie follows the main antagonist, Jack, a psychotic serial killer who must account for his crimes in hell. But before he does so, he is led around to the 9 circles of hell by the Roman poet, Virgil, who details his crimes through a series of flashbacks. The first killing starts off with Jack trying to help out a lady who had some car trouble on the road. However, she is ungrateful for his help when it does not work out, so, he just kills her, freezes her body in his warehouse. As you do. His second killing involves forming a friendship with a widow, Claire, and then proceeding to impale her. He is almost caught by a nearby police officer, but manages to quickly hide her body in the bushes before he can see. This is when he begins to form his serial killer alias, Mr. Sophistication, and starts sending in anonymous letters and photos of his victims to the police. Jack is shown having difficulty forming relationships with women. You know, we kinda saw that, but in case you didn't see the obvious. He kills his first girlfriend's offspring on a hunting trip and forces her to have a picnic with her corpses before he kills her as well. The killing of his second girlfriend, Jacqueline, is more gruesome as he chops off her breasts and keeps them as souvenirs. Now Jack is eventually caught when carrying out his fifth killing, which requires him to purchase a weapon. He gets tipped off to the police, who chase him to said warehouse, but before they can catch him, Jack encounters Virgil, known as Verge, who takes him back to hell. Now at this point, Verge has finished recounting his crimes, and they have reached the 9th center of hell. You know, the center circle. Jack tries to escape by running to a staircase, but instead he falls into the abyss, finally ensuing justice for his actions. The movie is said to have led to over 100 walkouts at the Cannes Film Festival, with many uttering their disgust towards the film. From there, news spread quickly, putting this movie's names on the lips of many horror enthusiasts. Most have probably only seen the theatrical cut, but IFC Films actually got in trouble for its release of the unrated cut, not long before the film's wide release, further adding to the notoriety of the film. The film polarized critics and was described as 2018's most extreme and controversial horror movie. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 60% based on 138 reviews and an average rating of 6.2 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, "The house that Jack built presents writer-director Lars von Trier at his most proudly uncompromising, hard to ignore, and for many viewers, just as difficult to digest." In October 2018, it was reported that the director's cut, which is the uncensored version that played at said film festival, would play in US theaters for one night in November, followed by an edited R-rated version release in selected theaters and on digital platforms in December. Now, immediately following the unrated director's cut screenings, the Motion Picture Association of America, otherwise known as MPAA, issued a statement condemning the screening for not adhering to the board's guidelines. In the statement, it was noted that the screening of an unrated version of the film in such close proximity to the release of the rated version without obtaining a waiver is in violation of the rating system's rules. Uh-oh. Failure to comply with the rules can create confusion among parents and undermine the rating system, and may result in the imposition of sanctions against the film submitter. Thankfully, though, by a couple of days later, I think it was the beginning of December, the MPAA had resolved the dispute with IFC Films by pushing the digital release of the director's cut back to 2019, as opposed to coinciding with the theatrical release of the R-rated cut. But the next day, the day after that all got figured out, the director's cut was released to purchase on YouTube for several hours. That's it, just 7 hours. How does the saying go again? Controversy creates cash? Number 4, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film from 1974 arguably puts slasher films as a whole on the map. In this film, we see Sally and her friends traveling through Texas when they find themselves short on gas. And when the local pumps are empty, they soon find themselves at the residence of the Sawyer family, a clan of people eaters who kill tourists for consumption. Doing the dirty work is Leatherface, the family's chainsaw-wielding butcher who soon makes short work of Sally's friends. The breeds and butchery of this film proved way too much for moviegoers across the world and was banned in many countries. As a matter of fact, the British Board of Film Classification had long refused its certification for the uncut theatrical version, and in 1984 they also refused to certify it for home video, amid a moral panic surrounding video nasties. After the retirement of BBFC director James Furman in 1999, the board passed the film uncut for theatrical and video distribution with an 18 certificate, but this was almost 25 years after the original release, which is almost as long as I've been alive. Due to the film's violent content, it struggled to find a distributor, but was eventually acquired by the Bryanston Distributing Company. It originally had an X rating from the MPAA, and it's not hard to see why. The director did actually limit the quantity of on-screen gore in hopes of securing a PG rating, but the MPAA was like, no, you're getting an R, be happy with it. I believe it was banned in about several countries, and numerous theaters stopped showing the film in response to complaints about its violence. The death scenes were way ahead of their time. One particular kill lives in infamy and sees good old Leatherface impaling one of the characters onto a meat hook to later be slaughtered, but not before she's forced to watch the infamous killer and one of her friends with his trusty chainsaw. It has since gained a reputation as one of the best and most influential horror films. It is credited, once again, with originating several elements common in the slasher genre, including the use of power tools as weapons, the characterization of the killer as a large, hulking masked figure, and the killing of victims. Empire described it as the most purely horrifying horror movie ever made, and called it never less than totally committed to scaring you witless. Fun fact? I think it's fun. The character of Leatherface and minor story details were inspired by the crimes of real-life mass killer Ed Gein. So, Yeah, get that what you will. Number 3, All Things Terrifier. Technically, I'm cheating a little bit here with a multiple for one special, but I'm sure you'll understand why in a moment, I promise. I will fully admit I don't really love slasher and gory films outside of Repo the Genetic Opera, but what I've seen of Art the Clown from a friend of mine, who cosplays him very well, I enjoy the character. Speaking of the chaotic clown man, for those who might not be aware, director Damien Leone first brought Art the Clown to life in 2008's The Ninth Circle. Surprisingly, Art the Clown's role in the short is relatively small, but he's easily the most memorable part. The film opens with a young woman named Casey waiting on a train when she sees Art sit across from her. Needless to say, she's quickly creeped out by Art the Clown, and after tricking her with a gift, he injects her with a syringe and kidnaps her. Art the Clown disappears from the Ninth Circle following this opening, with Casey waking up underground and being tormented by a demonic cult. The second half of the short is still atmospheric, though some of the masks used for the demon characters don't hold up nearly as well as, Art's black and white mime-like makeup. He eventually got the spotlight in 2011's Terrifier short, which followed a young woman who witnesses one of the villain's killings. After appearing in All Hallows Eve, director Damien Leone adapted Terrifier into a feature-length film in 2016, with the clown stalking 3 young women on Halloween. It's trashy in the best ways, featuring a jaw-dropping upside-down kill, and as most good flicks do, leaves the audience craving more. Enter Terrifier 2, last year's most shocking horror movie, responsible for fainting and vomiting across movie theaters worldwide. So after being resurrected by an unknown entity following the Miles County massacre, Art the Clown uses a hammer to brutally kill the coroner investigating his body. He goes to the laundromat to clean his red-soaked garments, where he encounters a little pale girl, a mysterious sinister entity in similar clown attire. A lone patron sees Art interacting with the girl, who's invisible to him, before being killed by Art. A year later, teenager Sienna Shaw is putting the finishing touches on her Halloween costume made by her father, who recently passed away of a brain tumor. Now, Sienna's younger brother Jonathan wants to dress as Art for Halloween, and has become fixated with him since discovering sketches of him and his victims in their father's sketchbook. Now that night, Sienna has a nightmare where she encounters Art and awakens to a fire on her dresser, which destroys the wings that were needed for her costume, while the sword that was a gift to her from her father remains unscathed. On Halloween, Jonathan sees Art and the little pale girl at school playing with a dead opossum. At that same time, Sienna and her friend Allie go to the costume shop, where they encounter Art. Art, in classic fashion, kills the shop vendor and later breaks into Allie's home, where he brutally maims her. Allie's mother is also killed when she discovers her daughter's still breathing flayed body. Jonathan shows Sienna and their mother Barbara his father's sketchbook of Art, filled with newspaper clippings of killings connected to him, revealing that the little pale girl bears a resemblance of his first victim named Emily Crane, the daughter of a circus performer whose body was discovered in a makeup trailer. Jonathan believes their father knew how to stop Art, but nobody else believes them. After Barbara tears up the sketchbook and hurts Jonathan, she finds her car vandalized, and while cleaning it, you guessed it, she's killed by Art. When Jonathan returns home, he finds his mother's corpse, and Art chases after him before drugging and kidnapping him, stealing Sienna's sword in the process. As Art's killing spree unfolds, the film becomes a gruesome ballet of brutality. The sword, a gift from Sienna's deceased father, becomes a focal point of both horror and hope, a macabre talisman that transcends the boundary between life and death. So we've got the whole film. We know how it is. This film got to the point where one of the producers had to take to Twitter to issue a warning about graphic violence and brutal depictions of horror. So watch at your own risk. And by the way, there's a 3rd installment coming next year. You'll never catch me watching all 3, but do with that as you will. Number 2, anything from Lucifer Valentine. Okie dokie folks, if you have emetophilia, skip ahead now, you're not gonna break my heart. We're good? Alright. So this director would be the man who created vomit gore as a genre of film, and just the thought of that has me trying my darndest not to retch. He's responsible for the aptly named Vomit Gore trilogy, 3 American-Canadian surreal psychological horror films which follow a non-linear narrative that centers around young runaway Angela Aberdeen, I love alliteration, a stripper that suffers from bulimia. The trilogy focuses primarily on situations involving vomiting, people eating, graphic violence, gore, torment, and more. In order, they're titled Slaughtered Vomit Dolls, Regurgitated Sacrifice, and Slow Torture Puke Chamber. Yeah, we're moving on before I also upchuck. You'll never catch me watching those, even if I love dolls. Number 1, The Human Centipede. Was there any other option to end today's list with? It's a 2009 Dutch independent body horror film written, directed, and co-produced by Tom Six. The film concerns a deranged German surgeon who kidnaps 3 tourists and conjoins them surgically, mouth to anus, forming the human centipede. According to the director, the concept arose from a joke he had made with friends about punishing a heinous criminal by stitching his mouth to the anus of a fat truck driver. Other sources of inspiration were Yahtzee medical experiments performed during World War II, such as those performed by Joseph Mengele, something we've talked about extensively on here. The director didn't mention the premise of the film for fear of putting off potential backers. I wonder why. Those who did finance the film didn't discover the full nature of it until completion. During promotion for The Human Centipede, press materials claimed that the film was 100% medically accurate, which I don't know how they can do that. During its festival run, the director remarked on how many audiences reacted strongly to the film, sometimes almost vomiting in the cinema aisles, and quite a few folks running out. Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a 49% approval rating based on 97 reviews, with an average rating of 5.15 out of 10. The general consensus states, grotesque, visceral, and hard to swallow. This surgical horror doesn't quite earn its stripes because the gross outs overwhelm and devalue everything else. I've never been able to bring myself to watch it, so let me know in the comments if you have.
Number 5. Fresh. I decided to start this list off light, so obviously a movie about a human meat business. Fresh. The movie opens up to Noah on a date with a seriously insufferable man, like the thin scarf and everything. Noah later meets a guy at a grocery store, Steve, and they hit it off immediately. Ironically, there's actually a fresh meat sign hanging right over the scene, which, you know, it's not funny, but it kind of is. Anyway, the two end up going on a date where the pair get to know about each other. Family, friends, connections, people who would go searching for her, you know, date topics. The pair strike up a fast and intense romance, and in just a couple of days, Steve invites Noah on a vacation to a surprise location. Noah hesitantly agrees, and they leave. Noah only tells her close friend that she's going, but Noah doesn't even have an address to give her because, hey, it's a surprise. Steve and Noah drive for hours. Noah notices how far they're going but doesn't mention any discomfort. In fact, she even gets an address to where they're going, which she tells her friend. Steve tells her that they're going to stop at his house for the night and finish the drive in the morning. They arrive at Steve's desolate modern house where Steve pours Noah a drink. Noah asks for the Wi-Fi, saying there's still no service, and Steve answers, "It must have gone out again." What? That wasn't the question, sir. He asks Noah to guess the flavors of her drink, which we all know is to get her to drink more of the spiked drink, and she ends up passing out. She wakes up in a large room, chained to a bed on the floor. Steve explains to her that his job is to kidnap women, do surgery on them to remove pieces of their flesh, and then to sell the meat to paying customers. Obviously, the lives of the women are then ended, and they slowly dwindle away into nothingness. Noah is able to speak to another woman that is there and discusses how long they've been there. But it's also revealed that Steve has an affinity for Noah, much like another woman who had written secret notes in magazines provided by Steve. Steve takes her out of her room for specially prepared meals which contained, you guessed it, human flesh. Back in the city, Noah's friend begins investigating her disappearance, eventually stumbling upon Steve's home in the city. There it is found out that he has a wife, who's missing a leg, who helps him with the business. Noah is able to build trust between her and Steve, and eventually he lets his guard down enough for her to make a move towards escaping. She ends up biting off his, before running out onto the property. Noah's friend is able to find the house, and Steve's wife begins to hunt Noah down, but is unsuccessful. Steve and his wife end up passing, and Noah frees herself and the other girl there. God, I'm never going on a first date again. Number 4, climax. This is by far one of the strangest yet most captivating movies I have ever had the pleasure to watch. It follows a dance group in France who are having a rehearsal and party before a performance. But about 30 minutes into the movie, everyone begins acting strange, and it's revealed that somebody spiked the punch with LSD. The movie opens with a myriad of interviews, introducing many characters and their reason for dancing. Then the movie shows the rehearsal and party, and then people started to realize that they were all acting weird, like tripping weird. I mean, people reacted as expected. Some people attempted to leave, only to find out the doors were locked. Some people began to have fun, while others were freaking out. Chaos seriously ensues. People are crying and screaming, amidst others who were dancing and enjoying their time profusely. One girl is set on fire. A young person whose mother danced there locked themselves in a bathroom and got electrocuted. Relationships began and ended, while others began to sleep with each other. Even, I'm not gonna say it directly, but a brother and a sister were in this movie. The group begins to turn on each other, accusing people of spiking the punch, but no one is ever able to come to a conclusion. Their attention spans aren't very long. The movie continues to pan around the building, showing the interactions everyone is having with themselves, the people around them, and the new hidden world that only they can see. Eventually, the group came down and saw that it was morning. They also found the previously locked door unlocked. The entire film is filled to the brim with amazing camera shots, acting, and dance sequences. It is truly a piece of artwork. Disturbing artwork, but artwork. The film's very last scene is a girl dropping liquid LSD into her eye. I'm not going to tell you who it is because the mystery of not knowing who it is creates such amazing suspense as you watch the movie. Number 3, Troll 2. Okay, I couldn't help myself. I had to add this movie in. Although it's not disturbing in the traditional horror sense, the acting, effects, and dialogue are surely enough to leave a viewer unsettled and confused. It has time control, teleportation, magic, an erotic popcorn scene, and as my mother put it, the whole movie seems as though it was directed by a 5-year-old and written by a 4-year-old. Troll 2 was made in 1990, but it seems like it was made in the 60s. I have never watched a horror movie that elicited such frustration yet amazement into my very core. The movie follows a family who decide to take an exchange vacation to Nilbog, a small desolate town. Upon arriving, the family realizes that its residents aren't what they first seemed to be. Yes, they did seem to be inhuman to the viewer, but somehow the family was blissfully unaware. The son, Joshua, keeps seeing his recently deceased grandfather, who everybody constantly calls Grandpa Seth. Yes, everyone. Grandpa Seth loves to tell Joshua stories of goblins. The sister, I honestly don't remember her name, is in a, I don't know if I can call it a relationship with a boy. She's upset that the boy has friends, and she also mentions that her family hates him. But 2 seconds later, she invites him to go on their vacation, saying that her family would be fine with it. I know, it doesn't make sense. The boyfriend decides to take an RV with all of his friends to Nilbog, meeting the family there. In the car, a weird dream sequence occurs. Josh sees Grandpa Seth on the side of the road, and for some reason, his parents stop the car and allow him to run up to the man. It is then revealed that the man is just a random decrepit man, and only Joshua saw him as Grandpa Seth, and the family gently ask him to return to the car. No sense of concern whatsoever for their young child who is running up to a strange man on the side of the highway. Upon arriving in Nilbog, the family is greeted by the owners of the house they will be staying in, and oh my god. I don't even know how to explain the interaction besides, no, I actually have no words. They enter the house and there is a feast laid out for them, but Joshua's Grandpa Seth appears outside a window and tells him that he can't let his family eat the food, which is covered in a green oozing liquid. So Grandpa Seth freezes time, and Joshua comes up with a great idea to stop his family from eating the food. He pees on the table. Yes. That was actually the only thing he could come up with to prevent his family from eating, while he was frozen in time, peeing on the table. And no, nobody questions how he seemingly teleported from the window to standing on top of the table. Instead, they lock him in his room. It turns out that the people in the town are actually all goblins. And guys, Nilbog is goblin backwards. What? They're trying to turn humans into plants so that they can eat them. The entire movie is just filled with the town residents trying to get the families to eat. Also, Grandpa Seth dies like 5 times in the movie and then he just keeps coming back. He also goes to hell for a second. The boys' friends turn into trees from the Goblin Queen, and there's a lot of scenes with people flailing at a slightly increased speed in one direction. Some may try to call it running, but no. These people were not running. I'm not sure what they were doing. The goblins also looked like they were played by slow-moving children. In fact, the costumes also looked like they were made by children. You know what? The whole movie seems to have been made by children, and not impressive film prodigy children, like preschool children who are progressing as they're supposed to. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. I honestly could do a whole video on this, but I'm aware that we're not talking about horribly fantastic horror movies today, so I'll get back to the list. I really beg of you to please watch Troll 2. No, there's zero storyline connection to Troll. And in fact, there actually aren't any trolls in the movie, but please watch it because I could easily do an entire video just talking about Troll 2, and I would love for you guys to really understand what I'm talking about. Number 2, Flowers in the Attic. Okay, so I haven't actually watched this movie, but I have read the book. And the fact that it was made into a movie is upsetting to say the least. This movie includes the imprisonment of young siblings for years and eventually leads to, a twisted attraction forming. The plot begins with a family's father passing away in a car accident. After a couple of weeks, the mother tells her 4 children that they will be moving in with her very rich but estranged parents, and that they would be leaving immediately with only 4 suitcases. Upon arrival, the children are greeted by their grandmother, who is a tall, sophisticated, and stern-looking woman. She leads them in through a darkened back entrance up to a small room. The mother tells the group of children that they will be staying in the room until their grandfather forgives her for marrying her half-uncle. Yes, I'm glazing over that, but once she and her father make amends, she will introduce all of the children and they will live lavishly in the grand mansion forever. The children were required to stay quiet, but they were able to play in the large attic that was attached to the room, and they would be brought food once a day. But things aren't as they seem. The group would end up staying in the attic for over 3 years. The oldest two, Chris and Kathy, took care of their younger siblings and attempted to bring joy and learning into their imprisonment. They would decorate the attic. Chris and Kathy's relationship developed into, I'm not going to say it, but I'm sure you can figure out what I'm not saying. Chris and Kathy first left the room with permission from their mother to watch a lavish holiday party that was taking place at the mansion. The next time they left the room was 3 years later, when they scaled down the side of the house and swam in a nearby pond. After years of their mother lying to them, they found out that her father had passed away years before, but wouldn't let them out of the room because of a clause in the inheritance she had received from her father. If it was revealed that she'd birthed children from her late husband, she would have to forfeit all of her money. Honestly, I'm kind of siding with the grandfather on this one. So, when the group figures that their mother never plans to release them, they decide to escape. In preparation for their escape, Chris and Kathy created a copy of a key left in the room at night to steal money from their mother. Most of the children do manage to escape, and this leads into the 8-book series. Yes, there are 8 of these books. I would love to say that I wouldn't recommend them, but the writing is actually really good. Number 1, Human Centipede. Yeah, I know everyone is expecting Human Centipede, but that's just because it's Human Centipede. It's so upsetting, it's so disgusting. I don't even want to talk about it. You know what? No, I refuse. I'm changing my mind. I'm not gonna talk about it. And honestly, I don't even think I can on this channel. Number 1.5, Creep. Yeah, this movie is disturbing. Never have I ever watched a movie that left me with such a disgusted, sinking feeling. Creep follows an amateur filmmaker, Aaron, who was hired to film a documentary for a man who is dying of a terminal illness and wanted to leave something behind for his son. Aaron drove out to a secluded house in the woods to meet Joseph, the man, and Joseph starts off his documentary strong. He asks Aaron to film him in the bathtub, scrub-a-dubbing and speaking of how sad he is that he will never meet his son. Then Aaron is scared by a realistic wolf mask, which Joseph tells him is named Peach Fuzz. Yes, Aaron stays. Then the pair go on a walk through the woods, alone, and Joseph keeps sneaking up and scaring Aaron. But it kinda seems like Aaron is warming up to Joseph. Joseph claims he just has a weird sense of humor. The two go to a diner and share a dinner that quickly turns very strange. Yes, even stranger. Joseph confesses that he had taken photos of Aaron before they had met, and that he had an animal within who is ready to kill. Back at the house, Aaron is ready to leave, but Joseph asks him to stay for a drink, and yeah, Aaron ends up staying. I know. Two have a drink, and Joseph shares some incredibly disturbing information with Aaron regarding his Peach Fuzz mask and his wife. Aaron puts something in Joseph's drink, takes his phone, and decides to call Joseph's wife in a hiding spot. Aaron is told that she is not his wife, she's his sister, and that Joseph does not have a terminal illness, and he doesn't have a son. She wants him to leave immediately. Freaked out, Aaron headed to leave, but when he exited his hiding place, Joseph was nowhere to be seen. Aaron, for some reason, looks around the house, like on the patio. Then Joseph sneaks up and scares Aaron, then says that he doesn't want to die, before running off. Aaron walks down the stairs to leave and finds Joseph wearing his Peach Fuzz mask and gyrating against the door. Aaron charges towards him, and then the camera cuts. We next see Aaron back at home complaining about receiving mailed gifts and videos from Joseph. Joseph sent Aaron a video of him burying large garbage bags in his yard. He sent a box containing a stuffed bear and a blade, or a stuffed wolf and a blade, and finally another video of Joseph apologizing for the first video. Aaron ripped open the wolf and he found a locket with both of their pictures inside of it. He throws everything away. The police provide no help or surveillance. One night, Aaron hears someone rummaging through the trash, and the viewers see Joseph standing at the front door. Another night, Joseph sneaks into Aaron's house and films Aaron while he sleeps. Soon after, Aaron finds another video of Joseph where Joseph explains how he found the locket in the garbage and how he wants Aaron to meet him by the lake for closure. You're probably thinking, of course Aaron won't go. No, he goes. He sets up his camera on and sits on a bench facing the water. Then, in his Peach Fuzz mask, Joseph comes up behind Aaron and ends his life with an axe. The movie closes with Joseph placing a tape labeled Aaron with a little heart on a shelf full of tapes just like it. He's heard on the phone introducing himself as Bill, requesting the exact same services that he had requested from Aaron. And yes, there is a creep too.
In 5th place, we have The Wailing. Rated 18A, it's a 2016 South Korean horror film written and directed by Na Hong-jin and starring Kwak Do-won, Hwang Jun-min, Chun Woo-hee. In the movie, a series of gore-drenched slangs hits home for Jung-gu, a slow-witted cop in a small town, when he discovers that his daughter, Hyo-jin, has become afflicted by, well, whatever is killing his fellow townsfolk. So he is, as the first hour or so suggests, completely out of his depth. And at one point in the film, writer and director minds his story back for, dark humor, and wins viewers over by making our main character look like a lovable screw-up. He's confronted with a mountain of bodies, an evil foreigner with a cabin full of creepy photos, and plague-like omens that manifest in the form of dead ravens, a rock-churning mute, and crazy dreams. The Wailing received widespread critical acclaim. On popular review website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 99% and an average rating of 8 out of 10, based on 82 reviews. The site's critics' consensus reads, "The Wailing delivers an atmospheric, cleverly constructed mystery whose supernatural thrills more than justify its imposing length." On fellow website Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 81 out of 100 based on 19 critics, indicating, universal acclaim. It was released in South Korea on May 12th of 2016. The film was shown in the out of competition section at the Cannes Film Festival in France on May 18th and was released in the United States on May 27th. It was then released on Netflix at a later date, but it has since been taken off the streaming service. Well, if you'll excuse me, this sounds like something I should perhaps watch, maybe even tonight. In fourth place, we have Repo the Genetic Opera. Call me biased all you want. This beloved train wreck and its sequels are some of my favorite comfort media watches. Where the heck else am I going to see an ensemble like Paul Sorvino, Paris Hilton, Anthony Head, Sarah Brightman, Ogre, Alexa Penavega, and Terrence Dunnock all in the same place? It's like a Tumblr fanfic mess come to life. Oh, and if you didn't gather from the title, it's an actual genuine opera, so it's entirely sung. The movie takes place in the mid-21st century, when an epidemic of organ failures leads to the rise of GeneCo, a company providing transplants at a great price. And by mid-21st century, I mean 2056 to be exact. So a little over 30 years from now. Those who miss their payments become targets of GeneCo mercenaries, who repossess the organs. The CEO of GeneCo, Roddy Largo, discovers he is terminally ill and is adamant that his offspring aren't worthy heirs to his fortune, and instead plans to give his entire fortune to 17-year-old Shiloh Wallace, the daughter of his late ex-fiancé, Marnie. In this crazy world of addiction and legalized killing, Shiloh is a sheltered girl who seeks a cure for her rare disease as well as information about her family's mysterious history. She meets a whole wild crew of folks along the way and learns a lot about her dad. Spoiler alert, it turns out he's been making her sick the entire time to try and protect/cure her, out of guilt from losing his wife. Granted, I didn't super expect a doctor by day who masquerades as a repo killer slasher man by night to be, super ethical. I'm willing to bet though, most of y'all have heard at least one song from this. Does Zydrate come in a little glass vial sound familiar? Zydrate is the substance that sedates folks for their surgery in this world, and it's super hecking pricey, ergo why most folks buy it secondhand off of dealers. This movie really likes its gore, and since it shares a director with the first 4 Saw films, you can probably get an idea of what to expect visually. Usually I'm not one for gore, preferring psychological horror, but something about this film just scratched a really happy itch in my brain the first time I saw it, and it has become a favorite ever since. When the film was originally being promoted, due to a lack of studio support, the director, Darren Bousman, and creator/grave robber, Terrence Dunnock, did most of their own promotion by hosting a Repo Road Tour. The tour was set up for one-night screenings in 7 different United States cities and included extensive question and answer sessions following each showing. Because of strong ticket sales, a second and third touring session were added, in addition to a British tour across 4 locations. The film received a limited release in the United States and Canada on November 7th of 2008 and was released in early 2009 on DVD and Blu-ray, featuring 2 audio commentaries, 2 featurettes, the theatrical trailer, and 4 deleted scenes. As much as I'll wax poetic about it, it's not for the faint of heart. The gore alone, never mind watching Paris Hilton's face fall off, can definitely leave an impact. If you do make it through Repo, I highly recommend also giving The Devil's Carnival and its sequel a watch. While they're not direct sequels to Repo, they have the same grit, and the dark circus and religion themes are fabulous. Also, you get the additions of David Hasselhoff and Adam Pascal, which makes it a win in my book. In third place, we have Barbarian. Probably the most recent release on today's list, and rated R. Barbarian came out in 2022 and was picked up by HBO Max, and later got bounced to Disney Plus when it was deemed too scary for the original platform. Netflix never wanted it, adamant it was too scary for their viewers. Documentary researcher Tess has booked an Airbnb and arrives at night in the pouring rain to find a guy named Keith is already staying there. So Keith is played by well-known spooky actor Bill Skarsgård, and if that doesn't ring a bell, he's the current Pennywise the Clown. Ergo, he's dang good at being creepy. He eventually convinces her to stay until they can get this sorted, and since she can see proof of reservation, she decides why not. And being a gentleman, the guy offers to take the couch. As is with many things I watch, my common sense is already screaming, but a trope is a trope. When Tess wakes up in the middle of the night, she's kinda shaken up to find her bedroom door has been opened, but Keith is asleep and assures her he did not touch the door. The next morning she goes for her interview and is warned not to stay in the area where she is staying. Upon returning to the house, she is chased inside by a homeless man who yells at her to leave and winds up locked in the basement, stumbling across a hidden corridor. corridor, leading to a room with a camcorder, a stained mattress, and a red handprint. Keith eventually tries to save her, but the pair are attacked by a naked, deformed woman, referred to later as the mother, who kills them. Later on, Airbnb owner AJ is introduced, zipping down some coastal road in a convertible, only to find out in a phone call that he's being accused of doing something horrible to an actress. As someone who very likely did said thing, AJ is more concerned with his career and putting this behind him. So he's been pressured to sell his assets to pay his legal costs, so he travels to Detroit to inspect the house before selling it and finds the hidden tunnel and tries to measure it, believing it may increase the house's value. So the mother attacks AJ in the tunnel and he falls into a hole where he meets Tess. A flashback to the 1980s shows Frank, the house's original owner, abducting women, sexually taking advantage of them, and keeping them captive in the tunnels. In the present, the mother locks Tess and AJ in the hole. Tess tells AJ that the mother wants them to act as her children. AJ is then dragged away by the mother, who forcibly breastfeeds him, and Tess uses the opportunity to get the heck out of Dodge. While the summary might not sound super scary and rather cheesy and tropey, it's the use of cinematography and framing that really sets the tone for nightmares for those brave enough to watch. Gore scenes include a head being bashed against a wall until it's a red pulp, eye gouging, which an arm being ripped off and used as a club, a red kaboom wound, and more. If that isn't enough, there's discussion and dialogue about sexual aggression towards women, as well as dialogue about inbreeding. I'm torn between wanting to watch this tonight before bed or waiting for a day off, but let me know what y'all think in the comments. In second place, we have Shrew's Nest. So this is a horror film that was released in 2014. It was deemed too scary for any streaming service until Shudder came to be in 2016, and has been highly praised as one of the original films of the platform. Plot is set in the 1950s in an apartment in Madrid. Agoraphobic main character Montse earns her living by working as a seamstress out of her home, and lost her youth taking care of her younger sister, who's referred to as the girl, who brings, some additional earnings to the household by working at a store outside of the home. Montse is at odds with the prospect of her sister establishing intimate relationships with males, despite the girl actually coming of age. Our main character chooses to hide from reality, feeding an obsessive, unhinged temperament, and experiences visions of her awful father who abandoned the family, mocking her. Carlos, a neighbor of the ladies, falls down the stairs and looks for help knocking on the apartment's door. And Montse, despite, reluctance, eventually proceeds to drag an unconscious and injured Carlos in. She becomes infatuated with him, who, being wounded in the leg, is unable to move out of the bed. During secret meetings of the girl and Carlos, the former advises Carlos to get the heck out of there, and to no success, as Carlos left the altar on his wedding night and is on the run from commitment from his pregnant fiancée, because he doesn't want to deal with the responsibilities as a husband and a father. So, gold star for him. Montse drugs him with morphine, and when he does attempt to escape, she sews his leg to the bed. After killing his fiancé and others, Montse meets her demise at the hands of the girl, who's trying to help Carlos escape. In Montse's last words, the girl finds out that she is actually Montse's daughter, as her grief-stricken father impregnated Montse after the death of Montse's mother. Instead of the dad running away, Montse poisoned him to put an end to his awful behavior on Montse herself and her innocent daughter, keeping her father's body on her bed for weeks before storing his remains in the armoire, and was too ashamed to tell her the truth. I promise not to spoil the actual ending, but it's a doozy. In first place, we have Night of the Living Dead. Yep, the first big modern zombie film. Released in 1968, it was directed, photographed, and edited by George A. Romero, written by Romero and John Russo, and produced by Russell Streiner and Carl Hardman. A crazy group of individuals takes refuge in an abandoned house when corpses begin to leave the graveyard in search of fresh human bodies to devour. Main character Ben does his best to control the situation, but when the reanimated bodies surround the house, the other survivors begin to panic. Any semblance of order within the group begins to dissipate. The zombies start to find ways inside, and one by one, the living humans become the prey of the deceased ones. If you haven't watched it before today, shame on you, because it's a masterpiece and a half. It premiered in Pittsburgh on October 1st of 1968, and it grossed 12 million American dollars domestically and 18 million internationally, earning more than 250 times its budget and making it one of the most profitable film productions ever made at the time. So it was released shortly before the adoption of the Motion Picture Association of America rating system, and the film's explicit violence and gore was considered groundbreaking, leading to a lot of controversy and negative reviews. Its first showing was a weekend matinee, and some folks brought their little ones to it. As someone who scares people for a living and questions when adults bring strollers to a haunted event, this was many times worse, fully traumatizing some of the little ones. Zombies are shown in this eating the organs and entrails of the victims they've killed. A young woman turns into a zombie and impales her mother to death repeatedly with a trowel. Zombies are killed with rifle targets to the head, set on fire, and crushed with tire irons. Humans are trying to survive, but they turn on each other, including one scene in which one man kills another with a kaboom device. It eventually garnered a cult following and critical acclaim, and has appeared on lists of the greatest and most influential films by outlets such as Empire, the New York Times, and Total Film. In 1999, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. In February of 2020, Netflix took down Night of the Living Dead from its streaming service in Germany following a legal request because the film is banned in that country. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I'm feeling the need for a Terrence Dunick triple feature tonight.
Number 5. The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project, now a true horror cult classic, was likely inspired by the story of Maud Dyer due to its striking similarities and overall tone. Maud Dyer is assumed to have lived in Leonardtown in the 1600s, and a lot of women living alone was not seen as normal back then. People in the town didn't know very much about her, and so she was labeled as mysterious. A deadly plague and a series of poor harvests caused a small community in Leonardtown to worry if they would survive through the harsh winters. The community was deeply religious and puritanical. The townsfolk believed that famine, disease, storms, and bad luck was all a result of witchcraft. A meeting held in the small local church came to the conclusion that Maud Dyer was the witch who had cursed the town with bad luck by calling upon the devil to terrorize the citizens. The Puritan community did not take this revelation lightly. They quickly formed a huge mob with the set intention of running Maud out of town. The mob surrounded Maud's small home and set it ablaze. Maud barely made it out alive through the crowds and flames, only having time to grab a small shawl for warmth. She ran for miles until her legs finally gave out. She passed out from exposure before sunrise, and she was found days later, completely frozen with a small boulder propping up her right hand, and she had raised her left hand to the moon and called a curse onto the people of Leonardtown. It is said that her handprint can still be seen on the boulder. The curse caused blighted crops, infertility, mortality, and familial misfortune. The spirit of Maud Dyer is said to still haunt the forested land surrounding Leonardtown, searching for the men who forced her out of her home. Supernatural events are commonly reported around the area. People will see will-o'-the-wisps, a white dog that causes car accidents, shadow people, thick unnatural fog, and frequent lightning strikes. The folktale of Maud Dyer is eerily similar to the Blair Witch Project, so it makes sense that the movie possibly took inspiration from the tale. One of the co-directors said that the movie was partially inspired by the time they spent in the woods and swamps of Florida. Yeah, those woods would definitely spark heavy inspiration for nightmares and horror movies. Number 4. Poltergeist. The 1982 film follows an ordinary family being tormented by an evil entity, which takes their youngest daughter into another realm. Though the movie is exaggerated, it is based on the events that occurred in a Long Island home, where the Herman family was plagued by a poltergeist. In the early spring of 1958, the Herman family reported a myriad of strange events. Bottle tops and lids randomly, inexplicably popped, ornaments flew through the house, bookshelves fell over, and a statue of Virgin Mary flew through the air and smashed a mirror over 12 feet away from its original position. The family contacted the police. The officer who went to the home to investigate was very unwelcome. He was nearly hit by a soaring globe, and a British press photographer witnessed flashbulbs from his camera levitate off a table when he visited. Priests and ministers from dozens of faiths conducted rituals on the front lawn, but nothing improved. The hauntings just continued. The family became more fearful by the day. Contractors, architects, plumbers, and electricians even investigated the house, finding no issues with the structure, pipes, or wiring. The fire brigade checked water levels. Equipment to measure land vibrations came back empty-handed, and there were no reasonable explanations. The family believed that the events were connected to an indigenous burial ground that was nearby, but they didn't stay long enough to investigate, as they moved out of the house very soon after moving in. The film takes large inspiration from the theory, and if people came to my house, took it over, confined me to a small desolate piece of land, and then built houses over the graves of my loved ones, I would be pretty upset. The set of Poltergeist is actually considered one of the most cursed productions of all time. People who worked on set passed away after and during the movie, half of them caused by grisly, strange, and aggressive events. Number 3. Scream. The popular horror franchise Scream is actually inspired from horrific events that occurred in real life. The first movie is based on a series of horrific, heartbreaking crimes that spanned over just a few nights in the summer of 1990 by a man known as Daniel Rowling, or more infamously known as the Gainesville Ripper. Daniel was born in 1954 in Shreveport, Louisiana. His father was a police officer who treated Daniel very badly. Daniel said that he remembers his dad telling him he was unwanted from his very first memories. The father treated everyone in the household very badly for the smallest things, like breathing in a way he didn't like. There are several heartbreaking stories throughout Daniel's childhood surrounding his father's temper and treatment. Daniel was arrested many times as a young adult for robberies and for spying through women's windows. As an adult, he could not hold down a job and found assimilating into society very difficult. By 1990, Daniel had relocated to Gainesville, Florida. On August 24th, Daniel broke into the apartment of two university students, Sonia Larson and Christina Powell. He proceeded to SA the two girls, end their lives, and pose their bodies in provocative positions before taking a shower at their apartment and leaving. The next day, on August 25th, Daniel broke into the apartment of Christina Hoyt, where he waited for her to come home, then SA'd her, ended her life, and left. But Daniel returned to the scene, thinking he forgot his wallet while he was there. He removed her head, placed it on a shelf, and propped her body up on the bed. He said he did this to add shock for whoever discovered her. Heinous. The events began to gain a lot of media attention. People began sleeping with weapons under their pillows or by their bedsides out of fear. On August 27th, Daniel broke into the apartment of Manny Tabota and Tracy Pauls. Daniel first ended Manny's life and then broke into Tracy's room. He SA'd her and then he ended her life. He posed Tracy's body but left Manny's in the same position he had been in. Daniel Rowling was arrested on September 7th of 1990 for a robbery, and through analysis they were able to connect him to the crimes. He was sentenced to lethal injection in 1994, which was carried out in 2006. Kevin Williamson, the writer of Scream, saw a special about the Gainesville Ripper. It freaked him out so badly that he began to have nightmares about Daniel ending his life. The fear he held is what inspired Williamson to write the screenplay for the movies. Movie adaptations of people like Daniel really throw me off, so I'm glad that Williamson didn't go the true crime adaptation route. Number 2, The Exorcist. The Exorcist was inspired by an actual exorcism of a boy from Cottage City, Maryland in 1949, and, of course, by the 1634 Loudon exorcisms. Wait, have you not heard about the 1634 Loudon exorcisms? Okay, but I guess I can explain it. I'm not upset that you don't know, I'm just disappointed. The writer, William Peter Blatty, heard about the Maryland case while he was studying at Georgetown University. Starting off in Maryland, circa 1949, a collection of newspapers reported the possession and exorcism of a boy named Roland Doe, or Robbie. Robbie's family was German Lutheran, and Robbie became very interested in paranormal spirits, eventually leading him to desiring a Ouija board, and lucky for him, his spiritually inclined aunt was more than happy to provide him with a board. The Doe family did not begin to experience anything strange until the aunt passed away. After she passed, the family began to experience strange vibrations, odd noises, and flying or levitating objects whenever Robbie was nearby. This was enough to convince the family that the help of their Lutheran pastor, Schulz, was necessary. Schulz arranged for Robbie to spend a night with him so Schulz could properly observe him. I think that this is the only situation where I will ever say that sentence and actually agree with the sentiment. Schulz witnessed the same odd occurrences and suggested that Robbie should be taken to a Catholic priest. Robbie underwent a series of exorcisms that did not go smoothly. He would slip out of restraints, break bed springs, and use them as weapons. He injured one of the priests with them, and he also screamed insults. More priests were called, but Robbie was not any more fearful than he was with just one. The bed shook, objects flew, he displayed aversions to religious or sacred items, and he spoke in a guttural voice. The exorcisms eventually stuck, after 3 priests stood in Robbie's hospital room and banished the demon from within. Robbie apparently had lived a totally normal life after that. He was even described as ordinary. The Loudon possession was a witchcraft trial that took place in 1634 in Loudon, France. A convent of nuns said that they had been visited and possessed by demons. Several nuns claimed that they were having visions of their recently deceased confessor. When asked about who they thought was possessing them, their answers varied. Some said that it was a priest, others said Peter and Zabulon. Physicians and apothecaries were contacted, and local magistrates were informed of the strange claims. Eventually, the Archbishop of Bordeaux was called. He ordered that the nuns be separated, and for a short while it seemed that the sequestration worked. But the nuns' behavior began to worsen over time. They began shouting, screaming profanities, and barking. The convent chaplain decided that a series of exorcisms was to be conducted. The Catholic Church investigated the claims and ended up accusing a priest of summoning evil spirits. He was later convicted of sorcery, which was a crime punishable by execution, and guess what? He met a fiery end on a wooden stake. The nuns underwent exorcisms, and everything did turn out okay, but it was still definitely a strange situation. William Peter Blatty took heavy inspiration from Robbie's 1949 exorcism, and I believe that though he definitely took less inspiration from the Loudon trials, it's clear that he was influenced. Number 1. The Amityville Horror. The Amityville Horror is an absolute classic. It has gained widespread praise and notoriety. It's also well known for being based on a true story. The classic movie, released in 1979, has had many remakes and sequels that attempted to capture the same thrilling energy of the original, but absolutely none of them compare in the slightest. The film gets its name from the events that took place in Amityville, New York, Long Island on November 13th, 1974, in an almost identical house to the one shown in the movie. A 23-year-old man named Ronald J. DeFeo Jr. took the lives of 6 members of his family with a firearm as they slept. DeFeo first claimed that he had come across the bodies, and even went so far as to claim that his family was the target of a hitman. But after only one day, he confessed his crime and admitted that it was him who took the lives of his family. But his reasons for what he did were ever-changing. He first claimed that he'd heard voices. Then he claimed that members of his family had helped him carry out the act. The reasoning has never really been confirmed, just speculated. Still, many remain perplexed as to how physically and mentally DeFeo could have committed these crimes. A year later, the Lutz family bought the house for an extremely reduced price because of the grisly events that had recently occurred there. And upon moving in, they began to experience every single sign of haunting imaginable. Doors would slam, beds would move, ooze formed on carpets, foul odors would linger, the house would remain ice cold. One of the daughters levitated over her bed, and one son would wake up every night at 3:15 a.m., which is the exact time that DeFeo's crimes were carried out. The family did not stick around. They packed up all their items and moved out within a month. The paranormal community caught wind of the house and decided to visit, including Ed and Lorraine Warren. No investigations ever produced any paranormal evidence, but a photo capturing the ghost of a DeFeo family member was supposedly taken. Lorraine Warren, though she did not see anything, did say that she felt a presence in the house. The mystery surrounding the haunting of the house is largely debated, and many say that it's likely false, but the horrific tale of Ronald DeFeo is sadly absolutely true. The true mystery that remains is what could have possibly made DeFeo commit this heinous crime. He was constantly changing his story, and he was the only one who knew the truth. Sadly, we'll never know what happened that night, because in 2021, after years of serving time awaiting his death sentence, his life was finally ended.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Infection from Splinter. Dangerous, deadly, and dang cool, this assimilated mass of splinters and organic materials is a monster that should be talked about way more. Director Toby Wilkins stretched his budget, creativity, and other resources to the max to make this creature work. So many iterations of it in pre-production, so much work with a local gymnast to make the motions appear both unnatural and totally right for what it was. Hell, the fact that they worked so hard to make the creature look the way it does without using a lot of digital effects is incredible. And I'm just talking about behind the scenes so far too. The actual monster looks great throughout the movie and is a genuinely scary force to be reckoned with. In Splinter, 2 very different couples end up in the same car on the way to a gas station in the middle of nowhere. The folks who own the car are a law-abiding duo who wanted to have a nice camping vacation, while the newest passengers are trying to make their way to the border without raising any suspicions. Not the friendliest conversations going on for sure. But when they arrive at the gas station to quickly refuel and find some snacks, they realize something is very wrong. The attendant is in the bathroom and very infected with some sort of splintery muck. These splinters take over any organism they come in contact with, transforming the host into an animalistic mass of flesh and spikes, looking to kill and subsume anything and everything with a pulse. The way it moves around, shambling unsettlingly quickly, is fascinating, and it finds all sorts of ways to kill and absorb its prey. Severed parts can act on their own to kill people, and often when they find new bodies, they will fuse together, creating bigger, more disgusting flesh amalgamations. Eventually, the surviving trio, sorry Lacey, realize that the infection is a zombifying fungus that uses its infected hosts to seek out more prey. It hunts by sensing warmth, which is bad news for humans everywhere. It takes a lot of guts and hard work to make a creature feature like this work, but the fungal infection in Splinter has so much going for it, and on such a small budget too, so it deserves all sorts of high praise. For whatever reason, it seems as though this one has been relegated to the relative underground, but I'm sure in due time, through the power of the internet, more folks will get to see and appreciate the monstrous excellence. Coming in at number 4, we've got the slugs from Slither. And speaking of well thought out monsters with less success than they deserve, here's a bunch of space slugs that Dunwich horror a sleepy town, directed by a young James Gunn. If that's not a recipe for success, I don't know what is. In Slither, a weird, rocky space egg touches down in the woods outside a small town. The local moneybags and his adulterous companion drunkenly prance their way into the trees and come across it just in time to be attacked by the slimy slugs within. This sets off a crazy series of events culminating in an entire mansion filled with flesh. You didn't see that one coming. See, these slugs are more than just slippery little monsters. At first, it might seem like they're similar to the titular creeps from Night of the Creeps, but as they germinate and grow, they become so much more. See, when they enter Grant, what a name by the way, he begins to act a little weird. He's more enigmatic than ever and begins to slowly transform into a strange, tentacly monster. As this happens, the slugs also influence Grant to infect his side chick Brenda and stow her away in a barn. So we've got the slowly transforming Grant on one hand, who is more dangerous with each passing moment, and then there's Brenda, who is inflating to enormous proportions full of slugs. Then, when the time is just right, she explodes like an overfilled water balloon, sending thousands of space slugs careening through the surrounding area. It is hideous, horrifying, and a little hilarious. And that's just the beginning. The amount of different ways these slugs are used throughout the movie is incredible, ranging from classic Wes Craven bathtub homage to a man being sliced in half by a tentacle whip in an open field to the enormous house full of pulsing flesh that I may have mentioned earlier. This is a movie that exudes personality, and a lot of horror movies that released around the same time can't necessarily say the same. The slugs start small but finish strong, and that's all you can ask for, really. But again, James Gunn was behind all this, so of course it ranks highly. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Djinn from Wishmaster. Be careful what you wish for, right? I'm actually surprised more people haven't tried to make movies about wishes gone sour. It's just such rich ground for excellent misinterpretation. I guess there was Wish Upon a few years ago, but that's a hot mess and a whole other category. But yeah, after 4 installments in the Wishmaster series, you'd think more folks would be scrambling to revive the series or at least do something with the IP. Especially with the OG Wishmaster being produced by Wes Craven and starring Angus Scrimm as the narrator. That's horror gold right there. Back to the monster itself, the Djinn is an evil genie who grants wishes in exchange for souls, but will always turn the wish into a curse. Kinda like a monkey's paw situation, you know? Wish for something you want, end up getting it, but it's been made into something nobody would ever want. I wish I didn't have to feel this pain right now. Well, then you'll die. I wish you would stop nagging me. And the person nagging you gets in an accident and loses their ability to speak. I wish I had more money. You get the money through some weird legal technicality after the local orphanage burns down. There's so much to do with people's desires using this character, plenty of irony to funnel into fun moments, and unlike a lot of other horror icons from that era of horror movie making, it seems as though the Djinn is not front of mind. Maybe the screenwriters wished for success, but then are doomed to spend eternity being forgotten. Who knows? Coming in at number 2, we've got the Jotun from The Ritual. Bar none, this is one of the coolest looking monsters out there. Like, the whole movie is basically a setup for the crazy reveal at the end, and it is totally worth it. You get little glimpses at this thing moving around in the distance, and a whole lot of time is spent making folks wonder if it's real or if they're just imagining things. Elaborate kills are put together to ensure that everyone knows just how big and powerful and full of malice this monster is, and it really sets the stage for when it finally appears. And once it does appear, it is lights out. The enormous reindeer-like chimera is a sight to behold, and it's not just about the looks either. The implication that it has held people in this little village with the promise of immortality only to let them waste away into barely currently living mummified bodies is horrifying. The guilt that it embodies, forcing people to relive terrible moments before luring them to their doom, is incredible. And it kills people by lifting them up, making them look into its dark eyes, and then impaling them on sharp trees. That's hardcore. Worship it and live a life of solitude and ritual, or be sacrificed. A tough choice with no real good answer. After releasing on Netflix a few years ago, The Ritual has kind of disappeared from the forefront of horror conversations, but I'd say this monster is an all-timer. Let's bring it back. And finally, at number 1, we've got the graboids, ass blasters, and more from Tremors. Come on, how are we gonna talk about underrated monsters and not bring up the legendary subterranean worms from Tremors? They've shouldered the weight of an entire franchise and still managed to go underappreciated. These things are legendary. From the first movie starring Kevin Bacon all the way up to the latest installment that was released in 2020, they've been burrowing underground and causing all sorts of problems for folks for years. Graboids don't mess around. 50-foot, leathery, hungry worms that burrow underground and emerge to swallow stuff whole. You can see the Dune influence for sure, but Tremors and all the subsequent entries make these creatures something else entirely. There are the classic graboids, which function largely underground, and that's just the beginning. They can spawn shriekers, which then run around above ground, and then there's ass blasters, which can fly and sense heat. It's a miracle anyone survived an encounter with these things. But for whatever reason, Tremors has been relegated to the B tier of horror, beloved but less well known. So if you're a fan of Tremors, sound off in the comments and let all the other folks find you. Coming in at number 5, we've got Fish Boy from House of a Thousand Corpses. When Rob Zombie makes a feature film with a title like that, you already know what you're getting into when you step into that theater. More sickening stuff that you can shake a stick at, a bunch of over-the-top characters being as disgusting and despicable as possible, Sherry Moon Zombie in a prominent role. But even when you're prepared for the inevitable, there's a lot of room for stuff to catch you off guard. Like in a movie jam-packed with folks boning the dead, using dismembered body parts for unspeakable acts, and a gigantic underground human experimentation hovel, you wouldn't expect a piece of campy country fried art to really turn your stomach. But subverting expectations is what this is all about. So yeah, Fish Boy. God, this thing is nasty. After meeting our cast of so-called protagonists, they end up meeting Captain Spaulding, who shows them a good time at his Museum of Monsters and Madness. They pick up Baby, and she guides them to her family home, where a bunch of uncomfortable weird happens. Now at this point, you know what's about to go down. The lunatic family in the middle of nowhere is going to methodically kill all these young folks, which is true. But the way they go about it is so out there that it made House of a Thousand Corpses a cult classic. And of course, we kick it all off with Dear Fish Boy. Poor Bill, he'd never stood a chance. After restraining the rest of their guests, the Firefly family gets to work on young Bill. Otis, a tortured artist, decides that it's time to make another masterpiece. Somehow, in a relatively short period of time, he sews pieces of Bill's body to a bunch of fish parts, creating a nasty, stinking piece of taxidermy that defies all conceptions of good taste. The reveal is shocking, especially in context, and the overall effect is nauseating. Crazier still, the creation of Fish Boy was supposed to have a lot more on-screen time and plenty more nastiness. Unfortunately, these bits got cut, but that didn't stop this scene from becoming one of the most disturbing across the Firefly trilogy. I know there are moments that are much more wicked throughout the trio of movies, but there's something extra special about our aquatic man-beast. Coming in at number 4, Operation from The Thing. If you were a kid with mediocre fine motor skills like me, you understand the stress of seeing that awful man's red nose right when you goofed up fake surgery. Even though it didn't actually electrically shock you or anything, it might as well have, thanks to the terrible sensation that making a mistake elicited. But here's the thing. Until you've had your arms chopped off while attempting to shock your pal back to life, followed by an unspeakable abomination oozing out of his lifeless body and escaping a defensive flamethrower blast, you haven't known true operating table terror. Ah, the Norris thing. The benchmark for insane practical effects. Name a movie scene with a more wicked monster transformation than this and I'll be impressed. Like, really impressed. When it comes to all of the practical effects wizardry woven throughout John Carpenter's Antarctic Quarantine classic, any of the Thing iterations could make it on this list. There's enough goop, blood, guts, and exceedingly pliable flesh to fuel a month's worth of body horror discussion, or 39 years if you want to be exact. But there are so many moving parts in this scene, so many good bits, that it's impossible to scrub it from your brain. First, you've got the high-intensity rush over to the defibrillator after Norris seems to have a heart attack. Cooper is ready to administer the shock, and then, whoops, a giant maw opens up in Norris's torso like some sort of human chest mimic. Actually, that's kind of funny if you think about it. You know, like a chest mimic, like a wooden chest mimic, but it's a human chest mimic. If that makes sense, let me know. I think it's funny. Then we get a bunch of flailing tendrils and a beautiful, disgusting face worm thing bursting forth into the world. As McCready takes care of the obvious threat with a flamethrower, the more human head melts off the table, detaches, and turns into a spider thing. Anyone's first watch of this incredible scene involves jaws on the floor and eyes wide as dinner plates. No exceptions. Personally, I have trouble feeling anything but awe when watching it play out, but that might just be the overenthusiastic horror fan in me. It is really cool for sure, but before it could be wicked awesome, it had to be disturbing. Coming in at number 3, Late Night Visitors from Hereditary. Essentially ushering in the latest era of family trauma-focused horror, a lot of horror movies get compared to Hereditary. But there's only one Ari Aster, and he knows exactly how to make folks uncomfortable. After giving every audience member a mini heart attack with the brownie-fueled late-night drive, Hereditary manages to insert a bunch more disturbing moments. One that seems to stick out more than most, however, is the penultimate sequence, right before poor Annie floats her way up into the treehouse. Peter wakes up in his dark house after a distressing day, and he stumbles across his father's dead body. As he makes his way throughout the house, the audience has a better view of the rooms than he does. Nude Paimon worshippers wait in the nooks and crannies of every room, smiling in the moonlight at their soon-to-be otherworldly king. To make matters worse, Annie has been totally overtaken by the cult and now seems to have otherworldly abilities, like scaling walls with ease. Peter makes his way up to the attic and witnesses 2 more utterly upsetting things. 1. His mother dangling in midair, hastily separating her head from her body. And 2. A bunch of nude cultists watching him from the shadows. Of course, the best and only option is to jump out the window. I would too. This is a scene that may well have launched a now potentially overplayed nude old people horror scene. Has anyone else noticed the uptick in naked senior citizens played for scares in recent horror? Just me? Coming in at number 2, Split-Tongue Frenching from Evil Dead 2013. Again, lots to be disturbed by in this flick, but one scene stands above the rest. After Mia is possessed by the abomination, she has a wild time tormenting all of her friends. She shoots David, who locks her in the cellar, which seems to be a good idea until you realize how creepy said cellar is. Her pal Natalie ends up down there with her, and that's when things get really gross. Mia says all sorts of horrid things to Natalie and begins touching her in ways you would never want a hateful demonic creature to touch anyone. She ends up biting Natalie's hand and then finds herself an X-Acto knife. Extending the blade to full length, Mia brings it towards her face and sticks her tongue out. Uh-oh. Using the sharp implement, Mia bisects her tongue, taking on the appearance of a really messed up snake person. Once the tasting tool is in twain, she wiggles the 2 bits around and then goes in for a smooch. There are layers to what makes this scene disturbing. Of course, the non-consensual nature of it is bad to start with. Then you add in the actual tongue being divided in 2, which is horrible to behold. And finally, there's the kiss itself, which conjures up the sensation of blood in your mouth. Somebody else's blood. Somebody else's tongue blood. And I can't imagine having a tongue like that forced into your mouth would be pleasant in the slightest. Yeesh. And finally at number 1, Teresa and Jack from Color Out of Space. Now, if you want to make something extra upsetting, add some tragedy to your horror. Nobody in this movie asked for any of this, but they're gonna get it. When a pink color touches down on your farm and begins changing the nature of everything you once held to be true, there's not much you can do. At first, it just seems like everyone's sort of losing their minds, but it is so much worse than that. After discovering that the farm's alpacas were horribly mutated by the color, young Jack and his mother Teresa succumb to the same fate. A bolt of energy fuses them together into an abominable mass of flesh and agony, unable to do anything other than writhe about. Sunlight hurts them too, so the family is forced to move the mass up into the attic. The reveal is disturbing enough, with the amalgamation of flesh and bone being quite hard to look at, but the shockwaves it sends through the rest of the family are almost impossible to reckon with. Nathan loses both his son and wife in one fell swoop, but they're not even really dead. They're an inhuman oddity, impossible to communicate with, but still containing bare elements of those that he loved.
Number 5. The Lighthouse. From visionary director Robert Eggers comes The Lighthouse, a harrowing fable that teaches us the importance of respecting personal boundaries and respecting seabirds. Eggers is one of my favorite modern horror directors, whose work sits a cut above the most usual horror fare with The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, which isn't quite horror unless you're terrified of Norway. The Lighthouse is unlike any other scary movies you've seen. Actually, it's probably unlike most movies you've seen. It's kind of hard to define The Lighthouse under one genre. It's unsettling and definitely makes me feel all heebly-jeebly watching it, but it isn't horror in the traditional sense. There's no monsters or slashers, just two men, a lighthouse, a whole lot of seagulls, and enough cabin fever-induced madness to shake a lobster at. A rookie lighthouse keeper, played by Robert Pattinson, is assigned to keep a lighthouse on a small isolated island off the coast of New England, under the supervision of the island's crusty old master, Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are some of the best working actors out there right now, and the two of these titans absolutely show up for this, carrying this two-headed character piece on their backs and speaking in some of the most hilariously memorable accents ever put to film. Seriously, Willem Dafoe's old nautical piratical accent in this thing needs to be taught in acting schools. I would do an impression, but I won't do it justice. The film is shot beautifully, the whole thing seeming like a mix between a bad dream and an avant-garde theater production, leaving you asking the entire time if anything you're seeing can be trusted, if any of it's even happening, or if the whole thing is all just one twisted nightmare between two very lonely, isolated men. Now, I can't say for sure if they went nuts because they weren't subscribed to Top 5 Scary, but I'm willing to bet that a little bit of entertainment from the best scary videos channel on the web might have helped some of that madness. So subscribe, maybe. Number 4. Annihilation. I've talked a bit about Annihilation before on this channel, and I will continue to do so until Annihilation gets the respect it deserves. That's my mission. I've never forgiven the movie-going populace for not seeing this one in theaters. Annihilation came to us from director and writer Alex Garland, who also gave us Ex Machina, a fantastic movie about having a crush on a robot. Annihilation is a cosmic horror story detailing the effects of after an asteroid crashes to Earth and a mysterious alien presence known as the Shimmer begins to manifest across a quarantine zone in a forest outside an army base. Everything the Shimmer touches starts to blend together. Biological life merging, double helixes swirling in a big cosmic gumbo. The film is hauntingly beautiful as it is terrifying. Our protagonist Lena, played by Natalie Portman, is a US Army veteran who lost her husband in an unrelated combat mission. One day he shows up on her doorstep, convulsing violently, leading Lena towards the Shimmer. Learning her husband was involved, she ventures forth with a group of fellow researchers and soldiers to uncover what lies at the heart of the Shimmer, what's causing it, and if it can be stopped. The film is a visual treat with its lush vistas and uniquely terrifying monster designs. I've talked about Annihilation Bear before, and I will take any opportunity to talk about Annihilation Bear. I love Annihilation Bear. Slap a photo of him back there for me. Annihilation is the perfect kind of horror movie, simultaneously exploring complex themes of depression, grief, humanity's inherent nature and propensity towards self-destructive behavior, but it also asks even bigger questions like, wouldn't it be really yucky if a bear had a human skull inside its head that screamed like a dying human while it was roaring? Get you a horror movie that can do both, okay? Number 3, Jacob's Ladder. While the first two entries on our list were pretty recent and well received, I want to throw it back a couple decades for our next entry and highlight a cult classic that could always use a little bit more love. Jacob's Ladder details the story of Jacob Singer, a Vietnam veteran who 4 years later, after returning home from the war, struggles to readjust to his normal life. Not helping matters much, no doubt, is the fact that Jacob keeps seeing horrifying monstrosities surrounding him every day. It seems as if since he's come home, nothing has ever been the same. The film shows us life through Jacob's tormented eyes. As he tries to navigate through healing and overcoming his personal demons, he is constantly haunted by real-life demons that seem to have a very vested interest in him. Matters only serve to get a lot more confusing when Jacob learns that other members of his platoon, back from his army days, have all been suffering similar things, reporting seeing the same monsters and being haunted. Desperate to find the truth, Jacob seeks out the cause of what's happening to him and his old friends, and ends up descending down a path of madness, learning things no man ever should. Worth noting is just how influential Jacob's Ladder is, serving as one of the direct inspirations for the legendary Silent Hill series of games, with Silent Hill 2 in particular taking major inspiration from the film's plotline, monsters, twists, right down to the protagonists even wearing the exact same outfit as a little homage. Jacob's Ladder is a little older than some of the other entries on this list. It is absolutely worth a watch and still worth your time. A great performance out of Tim Robbins and one of the most wild twist ending horror movies ever had. A bunch have tried to copy this. I'm sure you've seen a million hack writers copy it, but no one did it as cool as when Jacob's Ladder did it, so there. And actually thinking about it, I shouldn't even mention a twist, so there was no twist. Everything in Jacob's Ladder happens very literally. Go into it knowing that, okay? Number 2, Sinister. Moving. It's always stressful, isn't it? It's a huge pain. Well, Sinister is a 2012 horror film about an everyday family moving houses and all the trials and tribulations that come with that, like having to update your postal code on your information, unpacking your stuff and figuring out where all your art books are gonna go, and finding out that you moved into a house where a series of grisly rituals happened, sacrificing the previous family who lived here, and it's all been filmed and kept in a box upstairs in the attic. You know, just regular stuff the kids go through all the time. A struggling true crime novelist is trying to chase his glory days and intentionally moves into a house he knows where ghastly deaths took place in order to get close to the story so he can better research it and write a bestseller. He discovers a box in the attic full of film of all of the crimes and becomes obsessed with uncovering and exposing what happened, mostly so he can make a quick buck and get himself back on top again and make the late night circuit. As his obsession grows, it starts to affect his family and children in concerning ways, as everyone in the family starts acting stranger, having visions, hallucinations, and psychotic episodes, leaving you wondering if there is something much, much deeper going on in this house beyond a floundering author chasing a bestseller. Now, if you haven't seen this one, it's definitely worth going into this one as blind as you possibly can because the twists and turns totally make this one. I spent the entire runtime of this propped up on the edge of the couch, my heart pounding, hoping that everything would turn out to be totally okay, even though I knew better. It's a horror movie, things never go great. The movie's got a stellar sense of dread that refuses to let go once it starts and only lets you breathe out once the credits roll, and even then, not for very long. Fantastic performances across the board, but a special shout out goes to Ethan Hawke, who makes this thing. Number 1, Hereditary. Now, there are a ton of movies that could easily have taken the number 1 spot here, and I thought pretty hard about making The Shining number 1, since, you know, it's kind of a classic, but I figured a lot of people have talked about The Shining, and then I remembered the experience of seeing Hereditary in a movie theater, and how it was the only time in my life I've ever seriously thought about leaving a movie theater because I thought I was gonna throw up on the seats. I was so scared and uncomfortable. Hereditary is a 2018 horror movie from visionary Ari Aster, who also gave us the psychological horror movie masterpiece Midsommar, so Aster really just bangs out the hits. Hereditary is about as peak A24 horror movie as it gets. One of those ones where the monster is really a metaphor for generational trauma and all that. After the grand matriarch of a Midwestern family passes away, her daughter and grandkids begin to uncover the cryptic and terrifying truth behind their ancestry, trying desperately to escape the sinister legacy they've inadvertently inherited. This movie is terrifying in the worst of ways. It's not just jump scares or tons of blood. No. This is elevated horror. This is not your usual horror story. It really zeroes in on the way too close to home horror of watching a family break apart. It is gut-wrenchingly painful to watch, preying on really specific kind of fears. It's gonna get its hooks in you and have your teeth grinding for the full 2 hours runtime and for ages afterwards. If you've seen this, I dare you to look at a pigeon, a stop sign, cheese wire, or a treehouse ever the same after this movie. And staggering performances. Toni Collette goes for absolute gold and delivers one of the best performances I've ever seen in a horror movie, full stop. She needs an Oscar for most upsetting crying I have ever heard in a film, which is a category she would have no competition in. Hereditary might not be the goriest film or even the scariest movie I've ever seen or most upsetting. There's a bunch of Takashi Miike or Park Chan-wook films that would probably take that. But Hereditary is definitely one of the most viscerally scary movies I've ever seen. The kind that just sits in your gut and makes you think about it all day, like you were living through an actual nightmare. Watch only if you're truly brave. I know I made it sound absolutely horrible, but it is a great movie. Just don't be surprised if you don't sleep that night.
Number 5, Incantation. Apparently right now it's the ranking for the most watched non-English horror film worldwide, with over 10 million hours watching and rising. That's pretty sick right there, starting off, you know? Obviously I couldn't leave this one off the list with a reputation like that. So here we go. Incantation is a 2022 Taiwanese found footage supernatural horror film directed by Kevin Ko and co-written by Kevin and Chang Shiwei. Released in Taiwan March 18th, 2022, it became the highest grossing Taiwanese horror film ever made. Yeah, it's received international distribution from Netflix. Hey, Netflix, so good. Since July 8th, 2022. Here's the plot. A woman named Lee Ronan narrates the film, imploring the audience to memorize an insignia and chant an incantation to bless them and lift a curse on her 6-year-old daughter Dodo. The insignia and incantation are interspersed frequently throughout the film to encourage the viewer to pray along with it. Yeah, it's pretty horrifying. Ronan, her boyfriend Dom, and Dom's cousin Yuan break a religious taboo while documenting a ritual for their internet channel. They go to a remote village of Dom and Yuan's relatives who practice a religion worshipping an ancestral deity called Mother Buddha. The clan asks the three to submit their names with the incantation to Mother Buddha. And here we go. That night, the group spy on the clan performing a ritual where a young girl seems to be willingly prepared for sacrifice. The girl, whose body is covered completely head to toe in runes, was left in front of a tunnel which the clan said is forbidden. Ronan waits for the girl while Dom and Yuan enter the tunnel. Uh-oh. Yeah, that's not good. Yuan later emerges screaming and Dawn seemingly lifeless. Ronan and Dodo's house soon becomes infested by unexplained ghostly activities and Dodo is disturbed by a shadowy presence. They bring her to a shrine where a priest agrees to exorcise Dodo. Yunan later becomes possessed and sends copies of the tunnel footage. That's horrifying. Yeah. Just Chuck Liddelling yourself on a computer desk. Yeah, you're definitely gonna need a Tylenol after that one. Ouch. The film ends with some audience participation, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, don't worry, but after watching this, I kinda understand why it's rated what it's rated. Yeah, very scary, but also really good. As always, dudes, if you like what we do here too, hit the like button or leave us a comment down below. Which 2022 horror film has you hiding behind the covers? Number 4, Horror in High Desert. Horror in High Desert is a 2021 American film written, produced, and directed by Dutch Marek in a pseudo-documentary format featuring found footage elements about the mysterious disappearance of a hiker in Nevada. An experienced outdoorsman vanishes in North Nevada while on an outdoor excursion. On the 3-year anniversary of his disappearance, his friends and loved ones recall the events leading up to the disappearance and for the first time speak about what they think actually happened. The first part focuses on the police report of hiker Gary Hinge. Toward the end of July 2017, Gary hiked to an unspecified area in the Mojave Desert, and the police conduct a search based on the last GPS of location on Gary's cell phone. As time goes by, the media stop reporting, and a private investigator named Bill is asked to investigate so that the case would not be abandoned. The investigation then focuses on clues in the last of the published videos. Gary appears in frame from his home, narrating a very unusual experience. The footage found reveals that Gary was able to find his way back to some mystery cabin. There he hears chanting that seems to be human-like, and he eventually is attacked and the camera stops recording. Reporter and the private investigator speculate that who or what might have attacked the hiker. It is mentioned that the police have made this footage public in the hope that someone in the audience might offer some additional clues which spark a series of theories such as Area 51, atomic testing, satanic rituals, and of course, extraterrestrials. Yeah, that's absolutely horrifying. I didn't even see that thing. They really do a good job at involving the audience in the experience by asking them to help continue the search, which makes the film seem so real but not real at the same time, you know? Hey, great film. And I say aliens, that was definitely an alien, you know? I'm the alien guy, I'm just saying. Number 3, Dashcam. Dashcam is a 2021 computer screen horror film directed by Rob Savage and written by Gemma Hurley, Jed Shepard, and Savage. The entire film is shot from the perspective of the main character's handheld iPhone or the Dashcam in her car as she live streams her actions for viewers whose comments are displayed. Kinda hard to read and watch at the same time, but it really makes it scarier, trust me. The film, of course, is produced by Blumhouse Productions, so you know it's gonna slap. Dashcam premiered at the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival in September 2021, where it was named second runner-up for the People's Choice Award. The plot. Annie Hardy is a right-wing internet personality who live streams from her car, making music and using her viewers' comments as lyrics. Tired of COVID-19 restrictions and homelessness in Los Angeles, Annie books a flight to London. There, she pays a visit to her former bandmate Stretch, who now works as a delivery driver. When she arrives at the restaurant, Annie is surprised to find it abandoned before she encounters the owner, who offers Annie huge money to apparently transport an old woman, Angela, to an undisclosed location. Annie accepts the offer, of course, and drives with Angela while live streaming everything to her fans. And this is where it gets terrifying. Angela then vanishes into a nearby forest, and the group find her standing atop of a tree, to which Angela just floats down to the ground before attacking the group, showing them her supernatural abilities. Angela hunts them down, and after a terrifying scene that I'm not going to spoil, a humanoidish creature emerges out of Angela, where it now hunts for Annie.
Okay, Angela, this lady's gonna just take you to some friends, okay?
Nope.
Yeah, I would be saying a big nope too. Hell no, I'm not driving some scary old lady in the middle of the night. That's like rookie horror film nonsense right there. Great movie though, great movie. Very scary. Number 2, Spree. Spree is a 2020 American comedy horror film directed by Eugene Kotlyarenko. The gonzo-style satire follows a social media obsessed rideshare driver played by Joe Keery, who we all love. In an attempt to become viral, he live streams himself murdering his passengers. Ooh, it's a challenge of a role, I'd say. The film also stars David Arquette, Kyle Mooney, and Misha Barton. It was executively produced by Drake. That's saying something right there. Spree premiered in 2020 at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival and was released theatrically on video on demand in 2020. The film received mixed reviews, though critics praised Keery's performance and the film's premise. I really like this movie. I think it's a good representation of 2020 culture, you know? With phones in our hand every second, everybody trying to go viral, doing anything you can for clout. This movie does just that. Okay. Here's the plot. A young man named Kurt is obsessed with being a social media star and becoming viral. Kurt finds work as a driver for a rideshare app called Spree, then fits out his car with cameras and begins a new live stream titled The Lesson, where he instructs viewers on how to become famous on social media. Kurt starts picking up passengers one by one and killing them off with poison that he politely offers riders, as well as a bunch of creative, clout-chasing, performance heinous acts. You'll see. Kurt is then stopped by 2 police officers who grow suspicious of him. It's revealed that Kurt's murders have already become public, with Kurt being nicknamed the Rideshare Killer. After police are unable to identify him, Kurt tries to flee, but he too is pursued by police, forcing him to crash his car through a homeless camp. With Kurt's murders becoming more well-known online, Spree is temporarily shut down to allow an investigation to take place. Kurt tries to kill Jessie, the other character, but she pins him to the wall with her car and then in turn takes his phone and continues the social media presence which he started. Jessie then becomes a nationwide star after taking credit for Kurt's demise and capture surrounding the infamous rideshare killer. Yeah, I really like this movie. It's like super campy and over the top. It's serious at times, but also very gory. Joe Keery kills it with this role, and I feel like if you were needing a break from that Stranger Things character, yeah, we found it. You did very well, my friend. Very terrifying. And coming in at the number 1 spot, VHS 94. VHS 94 is a 2021 American found footage horror anthology film and the 4th installment in the VHS series. If you haven't seen these movies, they're great. Give them a shot. They're almost shot like a bunch of stories from the same era in one film. Like little mini true or false found footage movies that make the audience ask, is this campy or did this really happen? The film originates from a screenplay written by David Bruckner and Brad Miska. The overarching plot follows a police SWAT team who stumble upon a sinister cult compound and its collection of VHS tapes and what's on them. Following this series' cult origins around film festivals, VHS 94 has its world premiere at Fantastic Fest on September 26, 2021 and was also screened at the Beyond Fest on October 4th the same year. The film was released as a Shudder original film via Shudder, October 6, 2021, and later that month, Shudder announced that it had become the platform's biggest movie premiere in its history, with record-breaking viewership numbers. That's awesome. Horror movies? Let's go. It's great stuff. These films are awesome. Okay, here's some plots. A SWAT team gets a tip and investigates a prison cell-like haunted house with various static screens playing different found footage. The first is a Channel 6 news reporter, Holly Marciano, and her cameraman, Jeff. They are filming a story about the Rat Man, a local legend who has supposedly been living in the town's storm drains. After interviewing several citizens who have reportedly witnessed the creature to gain information, the duo descend into the storm drain where they find several homeless encampments. Where they find several homeless encampments. While filming, they are approached by a man covered in black goop slime, and he murmurs, "Ratma." They attempt to flee, but they are captured by other similar residents of the sewers. Yeah, I'm not going to spoil anything else because I really like the VHS series and the mini stories that they do. They're absolutely terrifying. The vampire part is the scariest part. I'm not spoiling anything. Check it out.
Number 5. The Conjuring. Now, if you're a fan of this channel, no doubt you know all about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed demonologists with a storied career in investigating the paranormal and unknown. You probably knew as well that The Conjuring was based on real events, but how much do you know about the real story that inspired the mega hit? Well, just like the film, in 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island with their 5 daughters. Almost as soon as they could start unpacking their things, however, they began to notice bizarre happenings around the home. It all started pretty small, just weird little things. Objects moving, a broom being found in a room different from where it was left. The girls would say that they'd see spirits floating around the halls, but you know how kids are. The mother, Carolyn, researched the house's history to see if there was anything that suggested it was a ground for spiritual activity. She discovered that the house had been home to one family for 8 generations. Not that scary. She also discovered that many members of this family all passed away under mysterious circumstances. Pretty scary. Now, just like the film, they learned at one point the house was owned by a woman named Bethesda, who was thought to be a Satanist and a witch. One of the parents' daughters thought that Bethesda's spirit threatened her mother's presence. And just like in the films, the Warrens found their way to the parents and performed a seance to try and speak to Bethesda and claimed they saw Carolyn Perron speaking in tongues during the seance. Now, where the movie differs slightly is that in the film, Ed Warren performs an exorcism and heroically saves the family and cleanses the house. But in the real story, the Warrens were sent away because the parents were worried about Carolyn's mental health. They also did not perform an exorcism, as Lorraine Warren said it wouldn't have been appropriate for them as they weren't members of the ministry. The parents stayed in the house until 1980, when eventually the hauntings started to go silent. This might be one of the few times a horror movie based on a true story had a happier ending than the real story. Love horror movies? Me too. Stick around at Top 5 Scary for more stuff every day. Let's keep on creeping on. Number 4. The Amityville Horror. Another haunted house story, and wouldn't you know it, another one attached to Ed and Lorraine Warren. If there was a haunted house in the Midwestern United States in the 1970s and they made a movie about it, well, by gum, those two names will come up a lot. They were very busy. The Amityville Horror has been made into a movie a few times, first in 1979 and again in 2005, if you can remember that terrible period when Hollywood was dredging up every single horror franchise and rebooting them terribly. Both movies are based on a real-life famous haunting, however, and while details vary between the films pretty wildly, let's see how they stack up against the original case. In 1973, a man named Ronald DeFeo slayed his family in a brutal crime, claiming that he had heard voices that had commanded him to do it, and there was some entity in the house. 13 months later, the Lutz family bought the house. The realtors had warned them about the house's grisly past, but it didn't bother them. You know how the housing market is. A friend of the family told them that it would be wise to have the house blessed, since there could still be evil inside the walls. After the family moved in, they described all sorts of paranormal wrongdoings going on. Green viscous slime coming up the staircases, voices speaking out to them, telling them to get out, flies all over the house, and the family even seeing wild things like specters. Now that's all pretty bad, but the film adaptations really take it up to the extreme. In the films, the Lutz family faces spirits directly, seeing ghosts, the father even gets possessed and attacks the family dog. Now, nothing this extreme happened in the actual haunting case, but there was a photo that was released that appears to show a ghostly boy walking across a staircase. But there's a lot of discussion as to whether or not it's legitimate, or whether or not anything involving the haunting was legitimate at all, as there are many who feel that it was faked by the Warrens and hyped up a little bit to try and make it a much more interesting story so they could sell books or movies. Well, real or not, it definitely worked, as the book was a smash hit and there have been dozens of movies since, meaning we're not leaving Amityville anytime soon. Number 3. The Exorcism. Now, The Exorcism is an iconic horror movie and legendary story adapted from a novel. Not many people know that the novel and the film were based on a real-life exorcism of a boy named Roland Doe, or so we think, as his real name has never been cleared up. Living in Maryland, Roland lived a quiet, sheltered life, relying on his aunt for company, a noted occultist, and fascinated with the spirit world. She gifted him a Ouija board at a young age. After his aunt passed, it wasn't long before the family home started to experience a series of strange strange paranormal events. Like it always does, it started a bit small, just objects moving around the house or water leaking from all the pipes in the house, but then eventually it started to ramp up. It seemed like Roland had become possessed. He started to fall mysteriously ill, and red scratches appeared all over the boy's body. The family was put in contact with the clergy, who suggested they needed an exorcist to help them. Now, unfortunately, although in the film, Reagan only needed one exorcism, albeit a brutally rough one, Roland wouldn't be nearly that lucky. Roland was exorcised round the clock for weeks and weeks. Now, he never turned green and vomited up pea soup, nor did he ever twist his head all the way around, but they did report that he would growl gutturally in a voice that wasn't his. He would speak Latin, and even threatened the priests by saying that Satan had taken control of his soul. On one occasion, during an extreme exorcism, he broke free of his restraints when he was tied to a mattress and managed to slash at one of the priests using the buckle, similar to Reagan attacking her exorcisers multiple times in the film. After weeks of battling, eventually like a miracle, Roland woke and said he saw a vision of Saint Michael and Satan battling for his soul. And after that, he was freed. None of the priests were slain like in the film, and luckily after this harrowing experience, Roland was able to live a quiet, normal life and tried his best to live under the radar, not wanting any more attention than he'd already had. After reading about it in a newspaper, author William Blatty was fascinated by the case and inspired to write about an exorcism of his own, which would then become The Exorcism. And then the movie was made, and well, the rest is pretty much history. Number 2. Annabelle. Another famous story from the Warrens' legacy. We knew we'd be seeing them again. Based around probably the most famous and recognizable haunted item in the Warrens' Museum of the Occult, Annabelle. The real Annabelle is a cursed Raggedy Ann doll that was one of the first cases the Warrens ever investigated. Now, the real Annabelle already looks pretty unsettling and isn't the kind of thing I would ever give to a child, but her Hollywood glow-up made her even more terrifying. The story of the film and the legend of the real Annabelle differ pretty greatly though. In the film, Annabelle is given off as a gift from a husband to his pregnant wife, whereas in reality, the Raggedy Ann doll was given to a nursing student, Donna, by her mother as a small gift. The film does feature Donna and her roommate Angie speaking to the Warrens at the beginning, describing their experiences with the doll. That's kind of where the two stories stop being the same and start differing greatly. The original story, Donna claims that the doll would move around their home, appearing in random places, occasionally having red stains on her no one could explain. She would complain that her and her roommate would wake up covered in scratches, again, no one could explain. They said they would find notes scrawled in red writing across the home, reading cryptic things like "Help us" or "Help Lou," the name of Donna's roommate's fiance. The most extreme thing any of them ever reported was that Donna's fiance claims one night while staying over, he felt something crawling on his leg, and when he looked to see what it was, he saw Annabelle on his leg and claims the doll leapt up at him. He woke up the next morning completely unsure if what he had experienced was real or not. Now from there, they contacted a medium to arrange a seance to see if they were dealing with something truly evil. From here, the Warrens were put in contact to help them and take Annabelle off their friends. While the real story is no doubt spine-chilling, the movie got a lot more dramatic, involving satanic cults, deaths, house fires, and a whole lot more. But still, I probably wouldn't want to spend any time near the real Annabelle, just in case. Number 1. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven was a master of horror. I don't think it is completely fair to call him a visionary and an icon of the craft, giving us not just one, but two legendary classic horror movie franchises, A Nightmare on Elm Street and the satirical horror movie series Scream. Freddy Krueger is larger than life as a horror icon. He's incredibly popular, appearing in several of his own movies, even coming into some of Jason's movies, starring in a couple video games as a playable character in Mortal Kombat and Dead by Daylight. A horribly burned dream-invading ghoul, manifesting people's worst fear and attacking them in a place no one can help them and no one can believe them. He's terrifying, but by gosh do we love him. It's no wonder Freddy's had such scary staying power. But I bet you didn't know Wes Craven was inspired by a real-life horror story for Freddy. Don't worry, there's no real-life groundskeepers that were cast into a furnace, at least I think. Wes Craven was reading the LA Times one morning and he read an article that pierced him and stuck with him. It was about a refugee family that fled to the United States for the fear of their lives. The son of the family was plagued by nightmares and said that he was too afraid to sleep. When he finally found himself falling asleep in the middle of the night, he was screaming and passed away during a nightmare. This spoke to Wes Craven deeply, who sympathized that he was too afraid to sleep and no one would listen to his worries, and saddened at the idea of something that would attack someone while they were vulnerable and away from the protection of supervisors and guardians. From that tragic story, Freddy Krueger was born as a manifestation of this horrible concept that affected Wes Craven so deeply, trying to conjure up the most evil thing he could think of. Since then, Freddy's become a pop culture icon and is not without his legions of fans, but few know the true story behind the iconic slasher. Number 5. Midsommar. So, first up on our list of the scariest movies is gonna be Midsommar, a movie that may hold the record for the fastest time I have ever seen something become a classic. I think Midsommar became a horror movie classic roughly 30 seconds or so after we left the theater. And there are some out there who knock on Midsommar for not being enough of a horror movie, but I would like to say boo on you. I think that's mostly bogus, just because it takes place during the day, and because like Hereditary before it, Midsommar is that nice kind of elevated horror that doesn't just get your hair standing on end and your spine all chilled, but also manages to get under your skin and start to pick away at stuff you didn't even know you were insecure and scared about. Just a bit after Ari Aster had traumatized all of us out of ever looking at a stop sign the same way in Hereditary, we got Midsommar, which will ensure I will never look at a bear the same way ever again. While Hereditary picked apart at the foundations of a crumbling family, Midsommar instead takes us into watching a friend group and a young couple getting torn apart, both metaphorically, which is scary in a very esoteric way, and literally, which is scary in a wow, that's disgusting kind of way. After a horrific, sad tragedy claims the lives of most of young Danny's family, she and her boyfriend find themselves growing distant from one another. Things look like they're gonna change when her boyfriend Christian invites her to a Swedish commune with his classmates. What looks at first like an idyllic vacation quickly unravels when it seems that commune is a Swedish word meaning scary pagan human sacrifice call, and Danny finds herself at odds with a new family that seems to welcome her grief with open arms. Midsommar contrasts gorgeous visuals of the Swedish landscape with some of the most stomach-churning body horror I've seen in a Hollywood production recently. Do you know what a blood eagle is, my friends? If you don't, do yourself a favor and don't Google that, okay? And if you do, yeah, well, you just know how horrible that was in this movie, eh? I figured we've all seen Midsommar. It's non-stop scares, but somehow, if you haven't, let me be the 1000th person to tell you should watch this movie. If you like spooky cult movies, this is probably one of the best out there. Just, don't be surprised if you can't bear some of the stuff that happens in this movie. That's a little pun about a bear. Now, my friends, if you're looking for more videos about horror movies you should watch, maybe some scary urban legends, stuff about SCPs, aliens, and just about anything freaky, well, subscribe to Top 5 Scary, because we got all of that and then some. Stay scared, stay subscribed. Number 4, Incantation. Coming up next on the list is going to be Incantation. It's the most recent one on this list. It just came out, and I guarantee it's not like anything else you've seen, unless you're a huge fan of Taiwanese found footage cinema, in which case, yeah, it'll probably be pretty similar to that, because that's what it is. Right off the bat, Incantation invites the viewer to join in on it, with one of the characters breaking the fourth wall and directly asking the audience to say a prayer for her daughter, which I think is such a good hook to immediately get you into a movie. A little bit of audience interaction, and then forming the movie as a found footage horror movie made it seem that much more real. Like, you kind of forget that you're watching a production. It immerses you into the characters as much as a movie possibly could. A young woman named Lee Ronan reveals to us that years earlier she broke a religious taboo by spying on a secret ritual, and as such cursed herself and her bloodline. And when her daughter is born, she finds herself being haunted by a malevolent spirit. This movie is like a buffet plate of horror genres. If you like haunted house stuff, demon possession stuff, exorcisms, well, this movie brings all of that to the table and makes all of it gripping and horrifying. And if you like really inventive, metatextual, postmodern horror stuff, well, the framing device and the found footage elements really pump it all up, and I wouldn't dream of giving away the movie's twists, but it has some that you genuinely cannot possibly see coming that turn the whole experience on its head. And admittedly, maybe this is more me telling on myself for having a very Hollywood-esque kind of centralized North American horror movie palette, but it's very refreshing to see a story centered around people I don't see often in movies and a culture I don't see often in movies, somewhere I don't see often, making an already inventive script just feel that much more fresh, you know? Don't be afraid of the subtitles, and don't deprive yourself out of Incantation if you're looking for a great new cursed movie to watch. Just, if you want my advice, definitely say your prayers before and after watching, you know, just to be absolutely safe. Number 3, Killing of a Sacred Deer. Coming up next is going to be Killing of a Sacred Deer from Yorgos Lanthimos, who has one of my favorite names in cinema. I needed at least one really psychological horror movie on this list that I figured most of you probably haven't seen. Like all of Lanthimos' filmography, Sacred Deer is relentlessly weird. If you want to watch a movie that's going to leave you shaking, sweating, and asking yourself in your dark living room, what the hell did I just watch? Then you're gonna love Sacred Deer, okay? A heart surgeon named Steven, played by Colin Farrell. He's got a perfect life, 2 children, a successful career, and a very, very strange relationship with a mysterious young boy named Martin, played excellently by Barry Keoghan. We learn that years earlier, Steven had operated on Martin's father, but failed to save his life, and since then has kind of taken Martin in and kept an extremely odd paternal relationship with the exceedingly strange boy, who seems determined to force himself into Steven's family by any means necessary. As Martin begins to uncomfortably ingratiate himself with Steven's children, their health starts to worsen in mysterious, paranormal ways that hospitals can't explain, and it seems like Martin knows a lot more than he's letting on. This movie feels like an actual honest-to-God nightmare that somebody filmed. It's kind of hard to describe. It doesn't really have jump scares. It's got next to no gore. There's like blood, I guess, but most of the horror comes from this unending dread, this creeping, unsettling feeling in the air that everything you're seeing is wrong. Every single line of dialogue in this movie does not sound like it was written or performed by a human being. I know that sounds like a bad movie, but everyone is performing so well that the atmosphere is like a mile thick. Everyone just talks in a way that's not in a way you expect or you're used to. It seems like everyone's from a different planet ever so slightly. It's so surreal, it feels like an extended dream. There's a scene where Barry Keoghan's character is describing how he and his dad used to eat spaghetti the same way, by swirling noodles around a fork, and it's a very innocuous conversation, but the whole thing around it is so chilling, it genuinely had me sweating. If there's anyone who thinks Barry Keoghan isn't gonna make a good Joker, please watch this movie and then come right back to me. This guy is so good at being a lunatic. This one is not gonna be for everybody, I'll be straight up. If you like your horror a little bit artsy, like if Midsommar and Hereditary totally spoke to you, Killing of a Sacred Deer probably will as well. But, you know, if you're looking for something with like a guy in a mask who's breaking through windows and pulling on Jamie Lee Curtis's ponytail, this might not be up your alley. If you're looking for something splattery and splashy, well, it might just leave you extremely confused. Number 2, The Ritual. Coming up next on the list is going to be The Ritual from director David Bruckner, part of the horror collective that contributed to the cult classic found footage movie VHS, as well as directing 2020's The Night House. The Ritual is one you can find on Netflix, and if you don't load it up after this video immediately, we're probably gonna have an issue. A group of college friends meet together after a shocking tragedy claims the life of one of their friends in a random robbery. Now, before the incident, they all had made plans to hike in the woods of Sweden, and let me just pause here for a minute. Is it a bit odd that 2 of the scariest horror movies made in the last 10 years involve a group of friends going out on a vacation to Sweden? If I'm learning anything from this list in contemporary filmmaking, it's that it's not nearly as welcoming as I thought. But I digress. The friends go to Sweden in their late friend's honor and discover that it is really not the best of ideas when things turn horribly wrong very quickly. Discovering an elk gutted out in the woods, they suspect there is a lot more out in those woods than just the wildlife. The Ritual is kind of like if the Blair Witch Project and the Wicker Man loved each other very dearly and had a beautiful baby and they let it play with Midsommar on the weekends. You get to watch a friend group at odds with themselves lost in the woods, deal with mysteries of a secret Nordic cult, and it's got lots of good, creepy, supernatural cult stuff, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'll say it's got one of the coolest monsters put to film in recent memory I can think of. I would love a statue of that thing. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot is going to be The Mist. Directed by Frank Darabont, who is probably the king of adapting Stephen King's works into films, having directed The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and The Mist. Interestingly though, unlike The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption, which are both very accurate depictions of the source material, The Mist deviates a little bit. It's got an alternate ending which is way darker than the original story, but here's the catch: Stephen King actually says he prefers it, which has to be the highest compliment possible. If the guy who wrote the original terrifying story can watch the movie and say, you did a better job. He certainly didn't say that about Stanley Kubrick. If you don't know the plot of The Mist, like all Stephen King movies, it takes place in a small town in Maine when a massive thunderstorm has descended upon the community. It focuses on a group of ordinary people caught in a grocery store locked in as a mysterious mist starts to encircle the town, and strange creatures from beyond this world start to complicate things. This thing is very tight, focusing on what happens to normal people when put up against the most overwhelming odds imaginable, trapped with eldritch horrors threatening them just outside their little sanctuary of suburbia, and trying to protect your family from all the danger. It is tense as all get out. If you like monsters and creative monsters too, oh man is The Mist a treat. They hide them well, you know, in the mist. You never get too good a look at any of them, but that wouldn't be much fun. The way they do it here, letting you catch glimpses here and there, and letting your mind fill in all the horrible details and all the tentacle abominations, oh baby, that's horror at its finest. Reminds me a bit of Cloverfield in that regard. You know, The Mist might not be the scariest movie ever made, but it is an absolutely great one that is often forgot about sometimes when we discuss great horror movies. It's out there on Netflix, so you got no reason not to. In fact, I tried pretty hard to curate this list of mostly stuff that was streaming on Netflix so you could watch them after I was done talking about it. Don't say the casual Crypt Keeper doesn't do anything nice for you, Nick.
Coming in at number 5, we have The Lamia from Drag Me to Hell. Now, Drag Me to Hell is a movie that divided viewers upon its initial release, but those who didn't appreciate it clearly aren't fans of the legend that is Sam Raimi. Released in 2009 and directed by Raimi, Drag Me to Hell is a supernatural horror movie that follows Christine Brown, a bank loan officer who has a curse placed on her by an old woman who she refused to extend a mortgage. Christine is subjected to 3 days of escalating torment, after which time she'll be plunged into the depths of hell. Scary stuff. No one wants that. Now, the demon in the movie, the Lamia, is absolutely terrifying and one truly powerful demon that you do not want to mess with. Not to mention, it has a wicked sense of humor and not in a fun way. The curse placed on Christine includes the torment from the Lamia, a goat-like demon that is conjured during a seance. The Lamia torments her throughout the duration of the movie, with the one goal being to drag her to hell to suffer for eternity. Not to mention, the hell Christine endures throughout the movie is horrific, whether it being the elderly woman sucking on her chin or a swarm of bugs. It's hell on earth until it isn't, which is a hint to the end of the movie. But watch it to find out. I want to go to hell. I'll see her there. Before we jump into number 4, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, it really helps us out a lot. Coming in at number 4, we have Abalam from The Last Exorcism. The first time I watched The Last Exorcism, I remember being truly terrified, with it being one of the most effective exorcism movies I had seen in a long time. Then they sadly came out with a sequel and we all just stopped discussing it, which was probably for the best. Released in 2010 and directed by Daniel Stam, The Last Exorcism is a found footage supernatural horror starring the likes of Patrick Fabian, Ashley Bell, Iris Barr, and Louis Hertham, with it following a disillusioned evangelical minister who decides to participate in a documentary following his final exorcism, while also exposing the truth and fraud of the ministry. Now, what we learn is that a lot of these exorcisms are fake, and Cotton Marcus corrupts people's minds into believing they are possessed in order to perform these fake exorcisms. However, things take a turn when he heads to a farm in Louisiana, where a young girl, Nell, has been disemboweling livestock. So Cotton pays a visit along with his camera crew and quickly has his lack of faith seriously tested. The demon in this movie is truly terrifying, possessing the body of Nell and having her do unspeakable things, contorting her body and breaking her bones. It's a horrific ordeal that ends with an even more shocking ending that I won't spoil for those who haven't seen it. Just watch it, but remember, don't check out the sequel. It's shockingly bad. Coming in at number 3, we have The Possession. This was a truly terrifying horror movie that I often forget exists. Let's change that. Released in 2012 and directed by Ol Bernadette, The Possession stars the likes of Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Kira Sedgwick, Natasha Callis, and Madison Davenport, with it being produced by Sam Raimi. Back again. The movie follows Emily, who at a yard sale comes across an antique box and convinces her father to buy it for her. However, Emily soon becomes more and more obsessed with the box and starts to exhibit signs of possession. She begins to act violent and is charged with supernatural powers. It's absolutely terrifying. Now, the movie is somewhat based on true events. In 2003, a business owner named Kevin Manis auctioned a wine cabinet on eBay. With the listing, he included a description claiming the cabinet was previously owned by a Holocaust survivor who said it contained a malicious spirit of a dybbuk. A dybbuk is a malicious possessing spirit believed to be a dislocated soul of a deceased person. The box ultimately became something of an internet legend, with it then being turned into The Possession after the rights to the story was sold. As of right now, Zach Bagans owns and displays the box in his museum. Also, funny story, Post Malone claimed he had a period of bad luck after coming in contact with the haunted box. Coming in at number 2, we have Henry Desjardins, The Taking of Deborah Logan. I forgot this movie even existed until now, and I'm so happy I remembered it. Released in 2014 and directed by Adam Robital, The Taking of Deborah Logan is a found footage horror starring the likes of Jill Larson, Anne Ramsey, and Michelle Ang. The movie is set in Virginia and tells the story of a documentary crew making a movie about a woman, Deborah, with Alzheimer's. However, they soon uncover something sinister about her while documenting her story. The movie soon starts to compare the symptoms of Alzheimer's with possession, with Deborah's behavior becoming increasingly more bizarre and disturbing. She wanders the house at night, levitates onto the kitchen encounters and even operates an old switchboard in the dark, speaking in French and talking about sacrifices and snakes. Creepy. It's here that they notice the line for 337 keeps ringing, with it formerly belonging to a local physician named Henry Desjardins, who disappeared after a series of ritualistic murders. We soon find out that Deborah killed Henry after he tried to use her daughter Sarah in one of his rituals. He is the one now possessing Deborah and using her as a vessel to sacrifice others and finish what he started. Absolutely terrifying. Now, I won't spoil the ending for those who haven't seen it, but the film is a lot, with one scene showing Deborah unhinging her jaw and trying to swallow a victim whole. Gross. And finally, in at number 1, we have Lipstick Face Demon from Insidious. Hailing from Insidious, this Lipstick Face Demon is arguably one of the scariest entities to appear in a horror movie, with his infamous dinner tables jump scare terrifying viewers for years to come. Released in 2010 and directed by James Wan, Insidious stars the likes of Patrick Wilson, Rose Byrne, and Barbara Hershey, with it following a couple whose son enters a comatose state and in turn becomes a vessel for violent and malevolent entities who are seeking entry into the mortal realm to wreak havoc. However, we soon learn that the son Dalton is not in a coma, but has the ability to astral travel, and has been unknowingly doing it while he sleeps, with Dalton likely believing he is dreaming. Unfortunately for Dalton, he traveled a little too far, ending up in a purgatory realm called the Further, and is trapped there by a terrifying demon, the Lipstick Face Demon, also known as the man with fire on his face. It is in the Further that we get a good look at the Lipstick Face Demon, and although he never speaks, he is able to communicate through dreams, with the grandmother recalling her encounter with him, stating, I quote, "I went into Dalton's room, there was something in there with him. It was standing there in the corner. I asked, 'Who are you?' and it said it was a visitor. I said, 'What do you want?' It said Dalton. I can still hear the voice." It is right after she utters those final words that we see the demon pop up behind Patrick Wilson in a terrifying jump scare moment. The demon has a red face and is muscular with black skin, fur legs, and cloven hoofs with a devil's tail. The demon keeps Dalton chained up in the Further while he files his nails and plays with his marionettes. Very creepy indeed. Such a specific fetish. Marionettes.